Good evening, everyone. We'll call the February 16, 2023 meeting to order. I would ask for everyone to rise for the invocation given by Father Bob Zwick of St. Francis of Assisi Old Catholic Church, and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening. Let us pray. Heavenly Father and ever-living God, loving God, thank you for the gift of these devoted leaders in our city. With your spirit of love, enable them to act with character and conviction, to listen with understanding and goodwill, and to speak with charity and restraint. We pray you continue to give these dedicated stewards, our community leaders, a continuing spirit of service. And Father, we ask that you renew within them the strength of your presence and the joy of helping to build a community worthy of human person. And so, Father, recognizing your servant, St. Francis of Assisi, we pray that you make us all a channel of your peace. Where there's hatred, let us bring your love. When there's injury, your pardon, Lord. And when there's doubt, true love in you. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Father Bob. Appreciate you coming out this evening.
Thank you.
As always. Let me introduce the dais. On our far right is our interim city manager, Jennifer Poyer. Councilmember Allbritton.
Good evening.
Vice Mayor Beckman.
Good evening.
Councilmember Bunker.
Good evening.
Councilmember Teixeira.
Good evening.
And our city attorney, David Margolis.
Good evening.
We're going to start out with some service awards. So as I call your name, if you would come forward. First, for 5 years of service from our city attorney's office, Owen Kohler.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Owen. Keep up the great work. Next, we have our Employee of the Month award for February 2023. And if I could have Arnold Santillan come forward from Parking Enforcement. Good evening. Oops, stay. We've got a write-up for you. We like Owen, but he doesn't get a write-up.
Arnold already has a difficult job as a parking enforcement specialist, but time and time again, he has proven himself to be a valuable asset to our team. Arnold started out as a crossing guard and moved up to a parking facilities and security aide in 2021, where he quickly learned how the department works and what more he could do to help. His job title as a parking facilities and security aide quickly changed to a parking enforcement specialist within his first year due to his hard work and determination in working with parking systems. Arnold has a difficult and sometimes thankless job of citing vehicles that violate parking regulations. He also assists the general public and coordinates with other parts of the department towards completing any and all tasks. He has gained knowledge on all jobs and continues to challenge himself towards greater accomplishments. We wholeheartedly appreciate all his hard work and commitment to the city, our citizens, and the department. Thank you, Arnold, for your wonderful service.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnold. Going to be a busy month and a half coming up. Next, if I could have Sue Bedry from the Tampa Bay Times come forward for the Newspaper and Education Week. Good evening. Whereas research tells us that the best way to help children discover the joy of reading and become lifelong readers is to involve them early and often. And whereas helping a child learn and love to read improves student chances of success in school and beyond, And whereas research shows that students who learn using the newspaper as an educational resource are more likely to become lifelong readers and informed and engaged citizens. And whereas Newspaper and Education is an international program that encourages the use of the daily newspaper as a living textbook for students from primary through adult education levels. And whereas for more than half a century, the Tampa Bay Times Newspaper and Education program has served educators, students, and families by providing classroom newspapers, companion materials, and instructional support. And whereas Newspaper and Education Week is commemorated and celebrated annually during the first full week in March. Now therefore I, Frank V. Hibbard, Mayor of the City of Clearwater, Florida, on behalf of the Clearwater City Council, do hereby proclaim March 6th through the 10th, 2023, to be Newspaper and Education Week in Clearwater.
Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Bedry, and all you do for our students and the community. Sure.
Thank you.
Next, we have a presentation by Steve Hayes, who is the President and CEO of Visit St. Pete Clearwater. Appreciate him coming out tonight and giving us an insight on all tourism.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Certainly glad to be here tonight. And as I was chatting with Mr. Hamilton, I was like, so how do you feel about season coming up? He goes, season coming up? Season's here. And I know I was talking to a couple of hoteliers last night and just looking at where we are. We had a meeting last Thursday, and we talked about what's happening, what we're hearing research-wise from the customer and what's out there. And I can tell you, I think it looks very positive going forward for us this year. And even as we go through season and into the fall. So I have a presentation. Mayor knows me. He also knows that I might get long-winded, but I think I've got some really good information here to share with you this evening. All right. Go through. All right. First, about who Visit St. Pete Clearwater is, and we are a department of Pinellas County government and the official tourism and marketing and management organization for the St. Pete Clearwater area, or for Pinellas County. We're funded totally by the tourist development tax, tax established by the Florida Statute 125 on short-term accommodations, so any paid lodging. And then we operate and expend funds in accordance with the Florida statutes and also the Pinellas County Code. So that's the official us. When we get down to the vision, and I think this is more important, our vision is to inspire travel to St. Pete Clearwater, a destination of unique communities, cultures, and experiences. And I think that's an important part, because I think it's what really sells Pinellas County as a whole, is the fact is we have all this uniqueness, that we're not the same thing throughout the county. Our mission critical job, if somebody had to say, when you wake up in the morning, what is it that you need to do? And I really look at it as two things. One is to go direct spending by our visitors in St. Pete Clearwater. Last year, that was $6.8 billion. Direct spending. It's not total economic impact. So that's what they're spending while they're here visiting. And then grow jobs supported by tourism. And last year, over 100,000 people were supported jobs in the tourism industry. And who benefits if we're doing that on a daily basis? One is businesses. And I look at the tourism industry as made up of small business. And I think all you have to do is go to Clearwater Beach and you can go through and see that. But think about other parts of the county or within Clearwater itself, the small businesses, restaurants, shops, and what have you, that are looking for people that are here visiting to help them in generating sales. But also who benefits are the local communities, especially when you have visitors coming in and now businesses are going in and creating jobs in those communities. And I think for the residents also, quality of place. we're very fortunate to live in a wonderful community here in Pinellas County. And it's through there that we can say, gosh, I can go to the beach, I've got cultural places to go to, I've got sporting activities, I've got all these things that I can do here that help enrich my life. And how do we go through to do this? And I think this part is critical, is development of sales and marketing programs to increase overnight visitors staying in paid lodging. And the reason why we do that is simply this: those visitors represent 30% of our total visitors, but they generate 75% of the direct spend. So think about it, somebody coming down from up north, my relatives come down from Michigan, we have a rule. If you can go through and you spend a couple of nights with us, after that, you got to get a hotel. But when they come down and they're generating dollars in the community. Day trip, you still get people to come over and visit. However, their spend is quite a bit less. I'm going to hopefully play a video here that kind of recaps the year and the different aspects of the organization and what we do. So here we go.
This past year, more than most, people were looking to get away, to just kick back and soak up some rays. They craved new, vibrant experiences. They needed an escape. And in 2022, together, that's exactly what we help provide. Let's take a quick look at some key highlights. Together, we welcome more than 15 million visitors. Tourists spent $6.6 billion in St. Pete Clearwater, contributing to an annual economic impact of more than $10.8 billion. So, how did we promote travel and position St. Pete Clearwater as an engaging, unique, diverse, welcoming destination? With collaboration and cooperation across departments. First, 2022 saw the launch of a brand new advertising campaign. Let's Shine rolled out across multiple channels to increase awareness and promote the destination's vibrancy, eclectic art scene, and of course, an abundance of year-round sunshine. In partnership with Keep Pinellas Beautiful, local TikTok influencer Colin Donaldson, and Hippo Popsicles, we launched Unwind and Be Kind, our award-winning responsible travel campaign, with messaging that welcomed visitors and provided socially responsible activities, including weekly beach cleanups, to make the most of their visit. Display and CTV campaigns delivered more than 123 million impressions on platforms like Spotify, TripAdvisor, TravelZoo, and more. Over $12.3 million in hotel bookings was observed direct from display marketing, with an emphasis on video. VSPC's social channels had 12 million video views across Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. St. Pete Clearwater was included in Travel + Leisure's coveted Where to Go in 2022 feature. 18 feature films were shot in the area, the most ever in a single year. Leisure Travel participated in an activation with Visit Florida at IPW. VSPC's booth in the Orange Grove saw amazing traffic from 5,000 buyers, suppliers, and media attending the show in Orlando. Visit St. Pete Clearwater took part in 10 Latin America tourism trade shows and trained over 2,400 trade professionals. The inaugural Virgin Atlantic fam trip helped launch the new daily service to the area from London Heathrow. We also coordinated a media visit for London's Nomadic Boys, a leading gay influencer couple, to help celebrate St. Pete Pride's 20th anniversary. Visit St. Pete Clearwater was also promoted during the NFL's first game in Germany. We hosted events for top-tier media and trade professionals at the famous Hofbrauhaus in the days leading up to the big game. Our meetings and conventions group continued to rack up awards and praise from event planners. We hosted 119 sporting events and generated a record 162,000 room nights. All in all, 2022 was an impressive year and laid the groundwork for a successful 2023. So now, let's take a look at what's down the road and all the opportunity ahead. Continue to elevate the brand through partnerships, activations, and unique media opportunities, like the Warm Up to Win activation we just completed in New York City, and ongoing influencer marketing to position St. Pete Clearwater as a four-season destination throughout our target markets. The Arts and Culture Co-op campaign will promote the area's world-renowned art scene and remind travelers of the unique and engaging ways to experience every aspect of St. Pete Clearwater, from museums, art districts, local galleries, and Instagram-worthy street murals. Through local events and a partnership with WFLA, we'll remind residents, business leaders, and the community about the value of tourism, its impact on our economy, and the quality of life in Pinellas County. And of course, St. Pete Clearwater will continue to host multiple high-profile fam trips. To see more about what our departments have been up to, be sure to check out the newly published annual report, and make sure to stay connected and involved online and through our social channels. So let's keep the momentum going, and we look forward to working together with you to help make 2023 another great year for St. Pete Clearwater.
Hopefully that gave you a little bit of an indication of what we do overall throughout the year. From an expense standpoint and where we spend the dollars, so we'll get into that. When you look over the far right, FY23 operating budget, our grand total is at $40 million, of which 31 of that is in promotion. So that's out getting the message about why you should come here and visit and spend your dollar here. And one of the things that I look at is, if you look at what the average person spends on vacation here, they have that in their pocket to spend, and they're sitting in, let's say, Chicago, and they're trying to decide where they want to go. They could go to a number of different places. I want it in Pinellas County. And so we hope that when they leave, that every last dime has been spent here. And so, but they've got those decisions to make, and that's why we have to have that messaging that's out in this market, especially this time of the year.
We don't want people to be penniless, though, when they go home.
No,
right,
maybe there's room for the toll
Okay.
going home. Okay. So the other part from the expense standpoint is by the different departments, and you can see the top two, advertising, promotion, digital communications, where majority of that dollars are being spent. But also I should mention the Film Commission. And I think that's critical. And you heard in the recap about the number of films that have been produced here this last year. And part of that is because, we have locally within Pinellas County a film incentive. The state does not have that. And we're one of the few places in the state. So by being able to go through and doing that now gives us more visibility out in the film, especially when we can get films made that mention specific places here in Pinellas County, like going to Clearwater Marine Aquarium or going to a specific beach. And that's one of the key things we've done this last year. The other item is sports and events. In fact, this weekend with I get the name wrong, but the Tax Slayer Softball Invitational, I think is the right name. It's going on at Eddie C. Moore. Huge success for this area, but the visibility, and we work closely with the City of Clearwater and ESPN to go through and help support that because of the visibility. And I look at this, if you don't watch it on TV, find some time to at least watch a little bit of it. But we have the outfield banners. And last year, I had actually watched it for the first time on TV, and I'm sitting there, and like every time they would hit, it'd be like a ball out in the outfield, then you would see America's Best Beaches just sitting out there. And then I would get the text from people that I know that don't live here, and they're like, "Okay, I just saw you on TV again." And that's what we want. Just talk to you a little bit about a winter campaign that I know we're coming into spring, but we have to advertise in the winter to make sure our message is out there. I'm not going to dive into this too deep, but basically we have developmental markets, and that's really up in Chicago, Atlanta, Indianapolis, Minneapolis, Detroit, really that good Midwest. And then from a top-tier market, New York, we also are generating business out of there as well. And then maintenance is places where we know we don't have to spend as much, but we got to keep our name in front of the potential visitor. All right. This is a copy of our TV spot.
Let's head south this winter. Let's wander off the beaten path and go out a little further. Let's get lost in the possibilities and lose track of time. Let's make a great escape even better. Let's shine this winter in St. Pete, Clearwater, Florida.
And again, I think you you saw in our recap video, this brand that we have out now is brand new this year. And so getting out into the market for the first time. This gives you an example of a billboard, out of area billboard. This is another one, another example of it. And again, in each of the markets we're in, it's just not one thing. So if you go into, let's say, Detroit, you're not just going to see the billboard. You're also going to get digital media, you're going to get TV. There may be other things that go with that. Some of the print. And again, when we tested the creative, one of the things is, while we are unique experiences all through Pinellas County, the one thing all of the folks that we tested with said, it's the beach. And so that we have to have front and center. But it's the other part that helps tell the story, which makes us different than saying going to, let's say, maybe Sarasota or a Fort Myers or a Fort Lauderdale, things like that. Talk a little bit about the tourist development tax. So if you look at the chart here, make it real simple. The gray bar represents where we are to date, and this will be through the first quarter of this year. Blue is our green, not green, orange is 2022, blue is 2021. To the Tourist Development Council, I had been showing 2020 and 2019, but it really, the numbers now skew those so much. What we have seen over the last year, actually the 2 years, is the number has jumped, and you can see where we were in 2019. So that's when I came on board, and solid at $63 million being generated by people staying in paid lodging. COVID hit, and you can see where that number dropped down to. A lot of that was collected in the summer, once people felt they could get back to travel, and then you saw that in fall and then into winter. And then in 21 and 22, you can see where the numbers went. And I go through and I look at it, and when we look at it, you're seeing that as a combination of not only the occupancy within the hotels and paid lodging growing, but also the rate, and the rate driving a lot of these different increases. So this last year, $95 million collected in the tourist development tax. This year to date is $18.9 million. And if my memory serves me correct, compared to the same 3 months last year, it puts us at 6.3% up for this fiscal year. For some folks, they say, what is the tourist development tax? It's authorized by Florida Statute 125, and it requires a creation of a tourist development plan as well as a tourist development council. So we have both of those here in Pinellas County. The tourist development tax is a 6% tax on all accommodation rentals of 6 months or less, hotel, motel, RV park, vacation rental, condo, home, really any going through in any paid lodging. And then Florida law goes through and dictates through the statute of how those dollars can go through and be spent. Current uses, current tourist development plan. So this is something that was approved by and adopted by the Board of County Commissioners. It is reviewed every 5 years. It sets out 5 categories for authorized tourist development tax uses. First 2 are promoting and advertising and funding the CVB, which will be Visit St. Pete Clearwater, and that is part of the promotions category, which is where 60% of the funds would go. The second part is 40% are allocated for categories C, D, and E, which is beach renourishment, capital funding and debt service, and then professional sports convention center capital costs. So that's our capital program. So that's currently what the TDT plan goes through and shows. Let me talk about our capital project funding program. So this is here. It's designed. This program is designed to contribute to the destination and the placemaking investments to go through and highlight our uniqueness. The projects must be an allowable use of the TDT dollars as defined by the state statute and also meet the TDT plan. There have been 2 cycles of funding, 2017 and 2019. In 2021, it was supposed to happen again, but with COVID coming on board and the pandemic, at the start of this, we really did not know what was going to happen. And so that program was paused in 2021, and now we have the resumption of the program in 2023. And currently, we are modifying the guidelines in the application and then looking at an application process starting in April, May. And what happens from there is interested entities would then go through it and apply. And then for whatever that project is, it'll come back to Visit St. Pete Clearwater, and then we go through and review. We work with a consultant, Crossroads Consulting, who then looks at all the projects and looks at things evenly. But we'll look, go through to make sure, A, it meets the TDT plan, it meets the statute. There's other questions they go through and ask, but primarily looking at, does it increase or does it meet a minimum in terms of paid lodging room nights and attendees? So there's your starting point. And then it's also divided into two categories, those that are 5 million below and then those that are above the 5 million. I kind of went through this already, but give you an example of projects over 5 million, project a minimum of at least 50,000 paid or documented attendees and at least 25,000 tourist room nights annually. And again, looking at visitation. We also look at, is that incremental, or is, and again, that's what you would like to see. So again, the great part is there's projects that have been done over the years. Here in Clearwater, Eddie C. Moore, Clearwater Marine Aquarium, Ruth Eckerd Hall, the Phillies have all benefited from the capital program. And this started up in, like I said, in 2017. So relatively new, but yet it is a good established program. The other thing I wanted to mention that's in here is we also have an elite event grant program. And that's another thing that we do on an annual basis, and where we help support events. And really there's 5 categories where they go through and can apply for that funding, and it's on an annual basis. And in that case, the very top category is you've got to be on national TV, and really there's only 2 that really qualify for that one. You've got the Valspar Championship and the St. Pete Grand Prix. Then you get the next category down, and then it has to meet a minimum in terms of attendees or room nights. And then the very last one is for new events. Something that's not in Pinellas County, has not been here, but it allows for somebody new to come in. And what we're doing is we're surveying folks there, determine the feasibility, the direct spending, the visitor profile of people going those events, which is useful for the event because now they can look at it and say, wait a minute, maybe I can now come in as a category 2 in funding, and it helps again show people that we have all this variety of things to do. And again, I think it's critical to show that uniqueness, but also that variety for visitors. So that is my presentation, Mayor. I'm hoping I didn't go over too much. I didn't see it come out.
Very good, Mr. Hayes.
I'd be open for any questions.
Open it up for questions. I just want to tell everybody that Clearwater represents about 34% of those revenues that are generated in the city of Clearwater on Clearwater Beach and our other hotels. We are the biggest contributor in Pinellas County by a pretty large margin. So, questions for Mr. Hayes? Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. I had asked for that presentation. Really want to understand the financial parts of it in anticipation of our budget discussions this spring, especially with the Phillies. I think wanting some TDC money. And so I just had a number of questions. So let's see. I'm going to go back to the front of it and then go through a couple of things. As far as Visit St. Pete, I love the advertising. I see it all over the place. But on one of your first slides, you talk about your mission being critical, mission critical job is grow direct spending by visitors to St. Pete Clearwater, and who benefits our businesses, especially local and small local communities and residents. One thing that I get concerned about is when our economy is so based on tourism, it's good for small business owners, but not necessarily the workers. Those jobs aren't necessarily high paying. So do you have any arm of your organization at all that considers the workers an average pay in a tourism industry community?
Actually, there are a couple things. One is, if you look at hospitality, and some folks, from this perspective, look at it as, I work at the front of a fast food restaurant, and they're getting paid whatever that wage is. And I think that's the ceiling. That's all where they can go. But yet, one of the fastest paths to management is in hospitality. And a lot of that is because when you look at whether I'm a restaurant, if I'm in lodging, and look at where you can go, those are the opportunities. I think the other part is, if the pandemic went through and taught us anything, is that from a compensation standpoint, you've seen the businesses now go to raise the wages so they can get employees there. And so I think that has certainly come there. We work with the economic development, in this case, here in Pinellas County, to say, all right, what can we do to help grow the tourism jobs? And again, I think it fills all the different areas, but we don't have a specific, we as Invasive St. Pete Clearwater don't have a specific person assigned to that. But on that note, I mean, that's something that we're getting more into by developing the relationships with the economic development side. Because it is important. I think with pandemic, we learned real quickly, at a restaurant, if you got to wait 30 minutes because you don't have the wait staff, your experience isn't there. So how do you help them, get through that?
Right, and whether it's a transitional job or not, they still have to live somewhere, right, when they're working at the counter or they're, in housekeeping at a hotel. So that's kind of a concern. When an organization comes to the TDC for money, so if we look at tourist development tax yearly, so 60% has to go to marketing and advertising and promotion, 40% can go to sports facilities, museums, and other capital things. I have a question. How much do we have in a total account right now, and how much do you like to keep in reserves? So I see we've got 94 million from last year. That's phenomenal. So what's the balance of the bank account today?
78 million in the capital fund.
78 million in the capital fund today?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then do you have a required or comfortable reserve that you like to keep?
I think there is an unofficial policy on a percent, but I don't know that off the top of my head, because that actually comes through the Office of Management and Budget. I can certainly find that out and follow back up.
Okay. And then, all right, and so we've got, I just had a quick question on your capital funding and debt service for publicly owned sports facilities and other certain types of capital facilities. So you mentioned like one of our ball fields, I don't know if it was Sidlickton or something that you guys funded?
Eddie Seymour.
Oh, okay, Eddie Seymour. Would our amphitheater qualify at all for any of those funds? Would it have, or could it have?
I would have to check, and the mayor knows, usually we go to council and say, all right, when you look at the statute, what applies to? So you can certainly find that out.
Okay.
I would think that it would, I just don't know that for a fact.
Okay. And then,
It has to have a heads and beds impact.
and you don't think it would?
Oh, I think it does.
Absolutely.
But I mean, Eddie Seymour this weekend is a perfect example, because the majority of the people that are coming to observe this softball tournament are from out of our region.
Well, and when we describe our theater as a world-class, going to attract everyone, I would think it puts people in beds when they come see those concerts. Okay, I don't know if we can retroactive or improvements or finishing touches, but just wanted to ask that question. And then, okay, so I think it's important for me to understand how those monies are given out. And so you mentioned that you have Crossroads Consulting that works with the TDC to evaluate projects and the benefits. And so if I listen to a presentation from the Phillies about their plans to improve, their stadium area. And part of it was they wanted to bring operations down here. Certain aspects of their operations would be year-round. And so more people living here, more professional management people, like physical therapists, people with degrees that would earn more money. And he thought that it would be about 75 jobs. So to me, that's pretty attractive, to have 75 full-time jobs that earn a good wage. When the consultant makes recommendations, do they look at the types of jobs? What kind of things are evaluated? And the reason I ask is, if we've got the Dali Museum is going to be asking for money, Tampa Bay Rays is going to be asking for money, I guess that there have been discussions about using some of that money, though it's not articulated here, for transit, because a lot of the tourists are coming back and saying, when you're doing these surveys, you need to improve some transportation options. And so I read some past newspaper articles that that's been a conversation of, should we expand the options of where this money can be spent, as well as recent conversations, I think it was last year, about increasing the amount of money in beach nourishment. And so I think it's important that we're aware of all of the different pulls on this money when we look at what are the Phillies going to ask for and what might be available. What is their competition? So if you can explain how those things are rated, is it quality of jobs, is it timeliness of being able to put a shovel in the ground? And I'm assuming when somebody gets awarded, they don't just get the full check amount written to them on day one, it's distributed over a number of years, right, as they develop their project?
So, a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, sorry.
Which is fine. All right, so let me go back to the process. So, in the application, the individuals that are applying are going to come in and look at and have basically an analysis done of that project. How many people is it going to generate, especially if it's a new project. It's going to come into, and so when those visitors, when I say how many people is it going to generate, well, how much of that is visitor versus how much of that is local. And so ask for the breakout from that standpoint. It's going to look at also room nights. But it's also going to look at incremental room nights. So an example of that would be, I am coming here to go to a baseball game, and that's my purpose. So that is a dedicated purpose. So that's going to have a higher value than I'm here to go to the beach. Oh wow, I just found out that my favorite team is playing, and now I'm going to go to the game. It still counts as a visitor, but what was the purpose? So again, you're looking at it from that perspective, but not really looking at the overall, if I'm coming over from Tampa, say to speak, or I'm a resident here in Pinellas County. So they'll go through and look at that. Then they start looking at direct spend. What would be the anticipated spending based on the number of people visiting, the number of attendees? And then that gets really into the economic impact. And most of your analysis will go through M-Plan or one of those evaluated programs. Then you also look at what kind of jobs would it generate. And again, what you're looking at is not only now, but going into the future. Mm-hmm. So you have that element to it. Then you have to look at it as well. Does it meet? Does it go through and meet the fit within the tourist development plan? But it also doesn't meet the statute. So it might be a great project, mm-hmm. but parts of that project, the whole project, may not meet the standards from those two things. So you have to go through and look at that. Also go through and look at it. It's like if you're building your, I'm making this up, but if I'm building my 500th ballpark and you've all the other ones there, it may not make as much sense as something that is unique. Mm-hmm. And the other element as well that you want to go through and look at is if we're going to do something, it's not going to take away from something else we already have. Even if it's in another part of the county, we need to be respectful of that element. And then also you go through and look at where is that project going to take place. So again, we're not known for just one place in the county. It is go through in multiple places. So the guidelines really go through and talk about that. Kind of leads to one of your other questions. So we actually have a workshop on February 28th with the TDC and the BCC, of which we're talking about capital.
Okay.
So that we can look at the bigger picture, because you are right, one of the elements is beach renourishment. We've had the discussions at the Tourist Development Council level. This year we went and added in additional dollars for beach renourishment, just for the unknown part, but also understanding what the repercussions are if things don't happen. Like with the, some issues we're having out of DC and getting approvals on certain things. So you gotta have, that element in mind. So, you have a lot of things that go into this, discussion.
How does the city putting skin in the game with money, how does that work with an application review?
So with the guidelines, and if the project comes in and says that it is, $1 million, $500,000 would come from the TDC, $500,000 would come from someplace else. Now that could be that entity. So basically it's 50-50. In some cases, and I was just reading some of the past projects that were funded, they got money not only from maybe a municipality, but they got it from the state, or they maybe got it from the Fed. So as long as they go through and meet the 50. The other part is, and you asked this question, goes back as far as the payout on it. Really, in what we've done currently, it was based on completion. So you need to go through, and once the project was over with, it went through and paid. However, some projects have been spread out over 2 or 3 years. And I think at that point, county looks at the cash flow and says, how could we go through it and make that happen.
Do you ever look at, so if the Phillies are going to come to the city and ask for some money so that we have skin in the game and can be part of a 50-50 application to the county this spring, do you ever consider the assets or value of, like, the Phillies when you make that determination? Or is it simply, these two entities, regardless of how much money they have in their coffers, are going to put forward, $50 million, and then we're expected, then the TDC will match it. So do you care what ratio that is, or the value of those two entities that are putting in the first 50 before they come and ask you for yours?
I think it will be noted, and I need to lay out this. I have not been through this process, so this will be my first time going through, but I think looking at the process overall and what's happened in the past is look at where else that money is coming from. And again, if someone can go out and get it from a foundation, great. It may come from a public entity. It doesn't matter, I think, who that is, as long as they're able to go through and show that they're able to get that money.
Okay. So
It has been beneficial in the past for the entity that is asking for the money to have a reasonable percentage. Back when originally Baker Ballpark was built, the county put in $7.5 million, I believe. The state put in $7.5 million. The city put in, I think it was 10-ish. And then the Phillies paid for the rest, and then any overages. So I can tell you that the Rays are probably going to be asking for close to $400 million. So we ought to remember that anything that we're asking for is going to be completely overshadowed, and we generate 34% of the bed tax, and St. Pete generates 7%. So let's remember who we're working for.
I do, and I think that's important. And, when I did the research on this, its estimated cost of a new Rays stadium is over $1 billion, and the Dali Museum wants at least $34 million for their expansion.
For their $68 million project.
Right, and so I guess, if we're, whatever percentage we're generating, I'm just wondering, frankly, I want the city to put in a little bit. I want the Phillies to put in a whole bunch, and it'd be nice if the TDC would put in a whole bunch. You know what I mean? I mean, look at who's got the money in their accounts. And those people, those entities should put in the most. I'm just trying to, I just want to grasp on those financials before we sit here and make our budgetary decisions and understand where can we, where the money is and who should be writing the checks,
Well, the
as we're
state
making a
puts
decision.
money in as well. So,
Well, thank you. I have a better understanding. I appreciate it. But how likely do you think it is that beach renourishment is going to pull a few more dollars? I mean, you've got a lot of dollars, but.
On the beach renourishment, there's a set amount each year. And then what we discussed last year in the budget, and we go through the budget process this year, is, and I forget the percentage we raised it up, but we'll probably raise that up a little bit again. And again, projecting forward is what we, going through and looking at is to make sure we're able to cover the nourishments that need to be done. Like I said, if some things don't happen out of DC, that cost may go up and we need to have those conversations. But if that isn't an issue, then we've more than planned accordingly to support that.
so right now in beach renourishment, we have $7 million. We're budgeting 9.3 this year. The issue is that the Army Corps of Engineers has decided that they have to have 100% permanent maintenance easements from every property owner that is affected by beach renourishment. So the biggest area is called Sand Key. It is not the Sand Key that we think of, which is just Sand Key and Clearwater. It runs all the way down south of Indian Rocks Beach. There are over, I think, 350 different
That was the
landowners
column
along
that
there.
goes to John's Pass.
Yeah.
It's the whole
And
island.
so, that's difficult, but we put additional monies aside. Our operating reserves right now are $83 million.
All righty.
I have the balance sheet in front of me, so.
Good. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions? Mr. Hayes, thanks for coming out tonight. We really appreciate all you do.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council.
All right, I would ask if there are any amendments to the minutes of February 2nd, 2023.
Move to approve the minutes.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. I'll open it up now to citizens to be heard. If there are any citizens in the audience that would like to speak to items that are not on the agenda, you can get agendas back on the back wall near the door. We ask you to fill out a comment card, state your name for the record, and we respectfully ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening. A few weeks ago, I came here and talked about my experiences at a local women's health care center, and I'm happy to report that in the time since I've been here in several weeks, I've noticed distinct changes. So I want to say thanks to Chief Slaughter, because I think that the police that are present, that are there, are much more present and engaged. Unfortunately, the demonstrators that are there are as vile and as full of vitriol as ever. That there's a palpable threat of violence in the air, and that that unfortunately has not changed. The harassment and the intimidation continues. And I want to tell you that the threat of violence is real. I want to share 2 data points with you. The first is some statistics from the National Abortion Federation. They track violence and disruption across the United States. And in 2 years, or 1 year actually, 2020 to 2021, they tracked stalking, blockades, suspicious packages, invasions, assault and battery. All of these have gone up in 1 year between 128% to 600%. So the threat of violence is actually real. But also, I wanted to talk about in this venue the fact that access to reproductive health care is a federally protected human right. That there is a 1994 act called Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, and this is under the purview of the Justice Department. This protects the right to access and provide reproductive health services and prohibits anyone from using force, threat of force, or physical obstruction against any person seeking to obtain or provide reproductive health services. The Justice Department has taken this quite seriously in the last year. Their statement says that they are committed to embracing federal law to protect providers and all people seeking access to reproductive health care. That access to reproductive health care is a fundamental right, and individuals must be able to access clinics to make decisions about their own bodies, health, and futures. And they formed a task force just this past July to address that. And I thought it was important to say that here in this venue so that we know that this is an important human right that's being tested in our own community that is protected at the federal level. Because as we know, women's rights are human rights. So thank you for the progress that has been made, and I look forward to strengthening the protections of women who are trying to access health care. Thank you.
Do I go ahead and start?
Yes, just please state your name for the record.
Okay, anything else I need to state?
If you filled out a comment card, you're good.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Jordana Smola. Good evening, Clearwater City Council. My name is Jordana Smola, and I am the Deputy Field Director at Equality Florida. Equality Florida is the largest LGBTQ rights advocacy organization in Florida and has always understood that the movements for reproductive freedom and LGBTQ equality are causes in common. I am also a resident of Pinellas County for about 2.5 years. I came to speak today at this meeting to inform you about the concerns I have regarding the safety of patients that are entering and exiting the Bread and Roses Women's Health Center that is located in Clearwater. No one in Clearwater should have to risk their safety to seek health care or feel unsafe walking down the public sidewalk. I am here tonight to say loud and clear that we have a significant issue of public safety on our hands. I have a records request of the list of police calls that have been made to the Bread and Roses Women's Health Center in the last 10 years up until the beginning of January 2023. Since 2012, there were over 175 calls made to the police department. Out of those 175 plus calls, over 70 were labeled with a problem as protest/demonstration, 4 were for trespassing, 10 were labeled as noise complaints, 8 were labeled as disturbance/disorderly, and 10 were labeled as battery, 2 of which were sexual battery. As you can see, the health center is experiencing a lot of disruption which interferes with patients seeking care and compromises the safety of patients, staff, volunteers, and the public at large. Extremists at health centers have always been a concern for the well-being of patients, staff, and volunteers. However, we have seen an increase in extremist threats, harassment, and violence surrounding health centers in recent years, including at Bread and Roses. In 2021, there were 12 police calls as a result of an incident, but in 2012, that number increased to 21 incident police calls. I expect that with the overturn of Roe v. Wade last summer, that increase of violence will continue to rise and escalate this year. These concerns that are affecting the patients' and volunteer safety are very alarming. Every day that Bread and Roses sees patients, there are tense and unsafe conditions right outside of the health center, and everyone faces safety risks. I hope that the Clearwater City Council hears these comments and concerns, and I call on you to take steps to ensure the safety of patients that are just trying to receive care and to protect public safety. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Emma Schock. Clearwater City Council members. My name is Emma Schock. I am the Reproductive Justice Liaison for the Women's Advocacy Movement of Pinellas, and I've been a volunteer escort at Bread and Roses Women's Health Center since January 2022. I believe that everyone has the right to enter a health center unobstructed and receive health care, as does the federal government, shown by the FACE Act. I've witnessed a clear escalation in behavior from the protesters and extremists, screaming at over 100 decibels, trespassing onto Bread and Roses property, blocking patients' entrance to the driveway, and harassment of patient escorts that has evolved to include threats and physical violence. The first incident of violence I experienced occurred on August 27, 2022, when one of the longtime extremists grabbed and twisted my ankle in response to me dropping and stepping on a pamphlet he handed me. The officer on duty de-escalated the situation on site, and the local state attorney pursued charges. On November 12, 2022, it escalated even further when another one of the longtime extremists struck me in the face with his "Jesus is the answer" sign. This took place after he was blocking a patient's vehicle from entering the driveway, causing a backup on South Highland Avenue. I told the extremist to move out of the way, to which he responded, "I don't listen to the devil." Eventually, the patient was able to enter the driveway while the extremist rushed towards their window, screaming. To shield the patient, I moved between their vehicle and the extremist, ensuring not to touch either of them. The extremist then intentionally struck me with his sign. I have a video of the entire incident. There was not an on-duty officer at Bread and Rosers that day, so police were called. When the responding officer arrived, she spoke to me for a few minutes, watched the video, then took witness statements from the protesters and extremists. Despite offering, no witness statements were taken from escorts, citing bias. The extremist was not asked to leave the premises, and he is still at Bread and Roses every Saturday. I'm grateful for the support I've received in filing charges for the first incident. However, I want to ensure this, or something worse, never happens to another escort, patient, or bystander patronizing local businesses. I fear for my safety, the patient's, all volunteers and staff, including the officer on duty, as well as the safety of children brought by the protesters and extremists. The patients must be protected from these extremist escalation and behavior. I tell you this to urge you, City Council members, to consider what will happen if we allow it next time, and what must be done to protect public safety at Bread and Roses Women's Health Center. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth, and I want to address an issue with the homeless people. So some of us are getting mistreated, and I don't appreciate that. You know, when I went to Safe Harbor, I was cornered by a sheriff in the hallway multiple times. I made a complaint, but I basically got mistreated and retaliated. Then when I went to Pinellas Hope, I was told that I was white trash by the guy running the place named Jeff. And I hadn't even stayed there for the allotted minimum time of 3 months. It wasn't even a month. And just randomly one day I got told by staff, "We don't want you here, you're gonna have to leave. We want you to get all your stuff," and wasn't even given the time to come back because I had too much to bring with me that one day, like the other people staying there did. So if you don't have a place to go after that, it gets kind of hard, right? And police were all on my case, trying to tell me that I had been trespassed from the place that I was staying, and that they gave me an official warning, which they didn't. I was going to a couple of the outreach centers, like the Refuge Church and Outreach Center, and the guy, Sean Powers, was being really verbally abusive, and not just to me, but some of the other people. And he wouldn't even let me use the microwave to cook my food. Every time I did, he would yell and scream at me, raise his voice. He yelled at one of my friends when she was talking to me outside. We were having just like a private conversation, weren't being loud or anything, but he just yelled at us. And then I've witnessed a bunch of people in the community have vandalized my moped, the only form of transportation that I had had. And then also like ripped a hole in the cover on it. Coming after my bike as well. There's a bunch of people on the Pinellas Trail laughing at me today and trying to run me over. I did not do anything to get in their way. I was just minding my own business, walking down the trail, trying to switch up my routes where I was walking, because it is not safe to be a woman outside on your own if you don't have anyone to walk with you. Then when I went on to the beach over the bridge, I got almost ran over by several people with their bikes, purposely looking in my eyes, laughing at me like they did on the trail in downtown Clearwater, staring me directly in my eyes, snickering at me, laughing at me. This is not me being paranoid or having some kind of delusion. It's people just ganging up on people, some homeless people, as well as, mostly just the homeless, but there's some homeless that get drunk, they do drugs, and...
Thank you,
okay,
Elizabeth,
thanks.
for coming out. Come on up, don't be shy.
Oh, I'm not shy.
Ready for this.
Thank you.
I came from work, I'm sorry.
dressed properly.
Could you just state your name for the record?
Good evening, Clearwater City Council. My name is Todd Hinkle. I'm the owner of the Living Salty Paddle Sports and Surf Shop right here in Clearwater. I'm here to bring awareness to an unfulfilled Clearwater community need. You see, our Clearwater community is lacking of designated and safe paddle sports launches. I've spoken on the subject last year in June during an ARP funds disbursement hearing at Countryside, and a second time in September at the Marine Advisory Board meeting. So I'm here now to let the new city council know about this community need that still has not been met. So as a paddle sports professional, I will give you 6 simple reasons as to why we need legitimate launch sites in our city. Number 1, safe launch sites provides enjoyable marine recreational opportunities. Number 2, it enhances and complements our parks and shorelines. Number 3, a designated site directs residents and future visitors where, when, and how to safely launch. Number 4, a designated launch will serve the handicap paddler safe access. Number 5, it prevents unsafe incidents where unseen obstructions or dangerous boat traffic may exist. And number 6, a designated access will improve the overall quality of life. Being on the water makes people happy. There are several great public shoreline areas that could be utilized after some needed improvements are met. A couple choice locations could be right here north of downtown at Stevenson's Creek next to the Shuffleboard Complex. Another great location would be at Overbrook Park. Other locations could utilize existing docks like at the Clearwater Beach Truck Center, or at the Island Estates Public Docks. Eric Andy has the gist of this. I spoke with him last year at the Marine Advisory Board meeting with the staff, and he told me what it would take to make this happen and come and see people. So I would say, in short, in conclusion, I'm sincerely asking each member to feel the urgency for a clear plan that addresses this unfulfilled community need for clear water. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henkel.
Fernando Gutierrez. Good evening, Mayor, council members. I come to you today and I thank you for the opportunity to provide a rebuttal for the Bread and Roses issue that's happening now. And as Paul Harvey once said, now the rest of the story. According to media reports, the council is considering a buffer zone on a public right-of-way that prohibits the ability to express opinions on abortion. I don't know if it's true, but that's what they're saying. The anti-life proponents are claiming subjective feelings of harassment that are only personal perceptions, lacking any foundation of objectivity. It naturally follows, when exercising our right for freedom, that we risk the ability of offending someone. It happens whether you're running for political office or you're out there saying, you know what, I believe in the right of the unborn children. There are measurable ways, though, and objective standards that we can use to debunk any of these abortions' subjective claims. One, look at the police reports. In all the time that Bread and Roses have been there, how many times have they arrested and prosecuted somebody for assault and battery? That's the question that should be asked. The second is, I'm sure you have some type of noise abatement ordinance. Maybe that can be managed so that it would apply to this situation or not. Should the council enact a barrier zone ordinance, I believe you're opening Pandora's box. What if the Scientologists now say, you know what, we need a barrier in our sidewalk because people, are against us? What if the Catholic Church, who are pro-life, say, you know what, we don't want pro-abortionists on our sidewalks. Let us have a barrier now. Ruth Eckerd Hall, or even the beach hotels? What if they bring in a performer that doesn't agree to my values or the community's values? Are they now going to ask for a barrier zone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? They're opening up problems. A month ago, two women came up here and they called us extremists. Hurt my feelings, but I realized that when you live in a free country, not everybody's going to agree with what I believe or what I say. And I have to accept that. That's the price of freedom in this country. And finally, Clearwater should be known, as earlier was noted, for our beaches and not for restricting the right of speech or religion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see you. My name is Hoyt Hamilton, in case you've forgotten. I am actually here to speak about something that's supposed to go into effect tomorrow out on Clearwater Beach, and that's the new traffic, quote-unquote, traffic pattern of the roundabout. All I can say about that is this is a perceived solution to a problem that does not exist. It is not a good plan. That, as John Duran used to say all the time, and those of us that know John, the roundabout still works. There have been very few accidents in the roundabout lately. People have learned how to navigate it. And there has not been an accident that involves physical injury. So I'm not sure what exactly it is we're trying to fix. And I can tell you with some of the drawings I've seen, it looks like, especially it's highlighted in red, like they're going to extend the center divider at the South Gulfview entrance and exit out into that first lane. And if you do that, you're going to have an absolute mutiny on your hands by the north end of Clearwater Beach. I mean, I can tell you, when I'm coming down south on Mandalay, and I traverse that roundabout multiple times a day on average, and if the right lane can't stay on the roundabout to get off the beach, and you force everybody to the left lane, it's going to back up basically to Baymont. And you're going to have people absolutely screaming bloody murder. And if you try to extend that island out with concrete, or you try to put up candlesticks, you're going to see people out there in the middle of the night maybe busting it up, because it's just not a good plan. It's really not, you're not solving a problem that truly exists with what they're proposing. It's, paint on the road right now is paint. People are still going to drive the roundabout the way they're comfortable, especially those of us that are very comfortable driving that roundabout after 20 years of traversing it. But the plan that's being implemented is just not a good plan, and to implement it right at the height of the kick of spring season is just another reason why this isn't the right time. So hopefully you can talk to traffic engineering, and hopefully, because I don't think the chief is going to have police officers sitting there to make sure people are going the right way. It's not a good use of police resources. So it's just, if it ain't broke, we don't need to be trying to fix it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
I got to go. Got to take my wife to dinner.
Enjoy.
Mayor, City Council, City Manager. My name's Jared Leone. I'm the president of Spring Branch Neighborhood Association, and I was here to speak about a letter I sent earlier this week about additional kayak launches at parks in the city. Paddle sports like kayaking, canoeing, and stand-up paddleboarding are a low-cost way for residents and tourists to enjoy the water, and have become increasingly popular with more than 37 million participants in 2020, according to the Outdoor Foundation. Additionally, ecotourism is a rapidly growing and important aspect to Florida tourism, accounting for nearly $10 billion in economic impact statewide, according to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. In Clearwater, Green Print, the city's sustainability plan, includes goals for job creation through sustainable tourism and improved public health by encouraging residents to spend more time outside involved in physical activities. In an effort to increase access to Water for residents and tourists. The Spring Branch Neighborhood Association, Living Salty, stand-up paddleboards and surf shop, Floating Lotus, stand-up paddleboards, and neighbors in the Overbrook Drive neighborhood urge city officials to create a kayak and other non-motorized vessel launch at Overbrook Park, the Lawn Bowling Shuffleboard Complex, and Sunset Point Park, Edgewater Drive. The launch in most cases can be as simple as regrading a portion of the banks to provide easier access to the water. These safe, clean, paddle-only launches would benefit Clearwater residents, visitors, and businesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Will.
I'm Mr. Haluba. I didn't hear anything in the St. Pete Clearwater presentation about the Clearwater City Ordinance making it illegal to lay down in public. As you would say, Mr. Hibbert, that's, odd. But I'm going to speak a little bit about recycling again. There has to be a procedural change regarding the recycling program. If we buy into all the excuses as to why it's not working, it all boils down to the fact that there's a finite capacity for recycled goods versus the amount collected. Well, presently, forcing every household to have one of these ugly dumpsters at their residence, and that causes the city to collect a large volume of something. A great deal of it is contaminated and not useful for recycling. Only, in my opinion, the fanatical and uncompromising recyclers care much about disposal rules. All of these individual recycling bins really should be picked up and recycled in their own right. Clearwater needs, as an alternative, to provide some sort of a central recycling facility. Something like that, perhaps, maybe not. That would work better than the failed program that's ongoing, still ongoing, that doesn't match volume with, capacity. And this is not a new thing. It happened in 2018. Recyclables were picked up and taken straight to the dump till somebody, brought it to the attention of the city. The city didn't come clean, like Mr. Hibbert would have you believe. If something doesn't change, you just go back and you repeat the same old problem over and over again. I don't think picking up recyclables at people's residences is the way to go. I think a central location or several of them would better match capacity with collectibles.
Good evening, Council. My name is Stephanie Sembler, and I am a volunteer patient escort at Bread and Roses Health Center in Clearwater. I have been a volunteer for the last 9 months, and in that time, there has always been the element of protesters trying to intimidate patients and clinic staff. But in this short time, I have seen intimidation tactics rise from mild verbal intimidation to extreme danger to patients, escorts, protesters, and the public at large. This is largely brought on by a group of extremists that has become a regular presence in the last 6 months. I have witnessed this group run through the surrounding private businesses in order to jump out at patients at the back of the property. I have witnessed these groups swarming patients' cars as they exit the facility, impeding a safe exit onto busy streets. As escorts, we have witnessed many near misses of car accidents as visibility is blocked by extremists running straight up to car windows. Not only do we see visibility blocked, but the level of stress and intimidation has pushed patients to make dangerous peel-outs onto Highland Avenue. When these conditions arise, escorts have asked the station police to help direct traffic to allow safer exits. Cooperation on this request is not always granted, and so escorts, who are private citizens, take it upon themselves to walk into the street to direct traffic. We do this not just for the patients, but so Clearwater residents simply driving by will not be involved in dangerous and expensive accidents. Let me add that these occurrences are happening while women are simply seeking legal medical treatment. I have heard from patients as they get out of their car how overwhelmed and frightened they are by these extremists. And on more than one occasion, escorts and clinic staff have been informed that when the outside of the facility is left unattended, these extremists walk onto private property and terrorize patients all the way to the entrance door. This situation as it stands has become extremely volatile, and the volatility increases week by week. I am here to inform you that this is worse than a nuisance. If extremists make good on the threats they regularly make to staff and volunteers, violence will impact the neighborhood, which is a dense shopping district here in Clearwater. Law enforcement in other localities favor their safety zone laws, citing effectiveness in curbing violence and maintaining public safety outside of reproductive healthcare facilities. Safety zones provide law enforcement the tools it needs to keep the peace, and most importantly, keep all our citizens safe. Thank you so much for your time.
My name is Mike Reardon, and I'm here to talk about two things. I've contacted a couple of council members with text messages, I think it was. I want to know more about the 2.1 million, I think, sound system for the amphitheater. At the one meeting, Mayor Hibbert brought up that he hadn't gotten clarification on it, and nobody wanted to buy a sound system. So I think we need some transparency on how $2.1 million. Was there multiple bids, and was there staff members working with Mr. Jennings, okay, who I assume approved it? And how do we end up with a $2.1 million sound system when every single presenter said, don't buy it? We're not going to get it now? We got out of it?
Never got it.
We're not spending $2.1 million. That's good to know. I've been trying to find out what happened. So we're going to lease our sound system?
Mr. Reardon, I think we ought to get back to you.
Okay.
I think there's still some clarification that's being done
Yeah, because
right now.
you brought up that you were trying to get to the bottom of.
That's
okay,
correct.
All right, well, I'll put that on the back burner. I'd just like to know, because I feel like we're going to turn around and try to sell it in 3 years because it's not going to keep up with what we need. The other thing is the $250,000 given to the chamber, Amplify, the ARPA funds that they got. It seemed like kind of a quick, I'm not sure why a nonprofit organization like them that works for all for-profit businesses as a lobbyist got $250,000 in ARPA funds when everybody else has to go through the grant system and apply for it. Some people won't get it. And it was apparently for an incubator, and I don't know anything. I haven't heard anything. No one said that the incubator system's going. But I'm not sure why we're giving out $250,000 to a lobbyist organization who did not even present a concrete plan. Some of the things I heard is that maybe they were using it to try to get some matching funds, but it was all hearsay. All I know is I heard $2.1 million was spent on a sound system we didn't need, and I heard $250,000 went out the door, and I don't know if it's been given to them or not, if it's still sitting, waiting to be, we sent them a check or whatever. No?
It hasn't been distributed.
Okay. I think anytime money goes out the door, there should be some type of criteria to get it, and there should also be follow-up with whether or not we're getting a return on investment. So I'm glad to hear we haven't given the $250,000 away, and I'm glad to hear that we're maybe not going to get that sound system white elephant that we don't need. And I'm tone deaf, so if I'm complaining about a sound system, you know it's not good. Anyway, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Reardon. Anyone else for citizens to be heard?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Patrick Raftery, 44-year resident of Clearwater. I reside up in the countryside area. I'd like to make a few comments about the recycling problem that we have here at the city of Clearwater, and I think the previous speaker is perfect timing for me to make my comments to you. Myself and a number of residents are very concerned about this issue. We're looking forward to the report that will be coming, I believe, from Mr. Maxwell, as well as perhaps outside consultants taking a look at some of the contracts that could be issued or should be issued to resume the recycling program. We're looking forward to that, and we anticipate it will be done in a timely fashion, but it'll be quite comprehensive because the problem's a lot larger than we first heard about, if you will. Recent issues coming forward this week, I believe alone, relative to contracts that were not being issued by the city to take care of processing of recyclables. Another thing I think that should be thought about is perhaps it's time for the residents of Clearwater to further restrict the items that we are recycling. If there is in fact a capacity program, a problem, if you will, maybe we need to restrict those items that we're recycling to make it easier to process those things. There's been another discussion relative to the credit that might be going to the residents for when the recycling was not being done. I heard a figure of 81 cents a month for 6 months, $4.86. I've also heard another figure of $20.28 for 6 months, which would cost the city over $1 million to reimburse at that figure. I'd like to suggest to yourselves and perhaps to Mr. Maxwell that they consider a medium between those two of $10.14, which is half of the $20.28 to be credited back to the citizens. And that would be an expense to the city of a little over $500,000. It's certainly something the city is going to have to undertake, but there is something that needs to be done to reestablish the trust and confidence that the residents have in their city. Finally, when that report is issued, I hope there's full transparency as to what happened, what have we learned from those events, and what corrective actions were taken to prevent a reoccurrence. And to the city manager in particular, I'd like to make the comment that we need to make sure that within the city operations, there is a culture established that when something is not being done or something is wrong, we need not fear reporting that to the proper authorities. With respect to this issue here, can you imagine how much easier it would have been for the city and ourselves to be aware of this problem when it first occurred and to begin to take steps to correct it and be fully transparent to the residents? So my message on that is to make sure in every operation of the city that there's a culture that says we have a duty to perform, and when we are not performing that duty, we have an obligation to report that to our supervisors and the city council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rafferty. I do want people to know that we are fully recycling right now. It is costing us more than it has previously, but we are recycling right now.
Hi, on recycling, my name's Lisa Lanza. I take my electronics right down the street. There's a place on Hercules, and 24 hours a day I just drop it at the door, and he's happy. I don't know if you've ever toured I think it's called E-Cycles, and they've got a big warehouse there. They take computers, and so I don't bother the city of Clearwater with that. And okay, so I have 3 things to talk about: the kayaking and Stevenson. No, I'm going to skip that one because I talked to them out in the hallway about it. Okay. Number 1, we had some emails going around back and forth today about the Clearwater Downtown Partnership, and since those emails, I followed up, and there are some updates to some biz on the Clearwater Downtown Partnership. I won't go into detail, but it's in the email, so check those. I also just spoke to Attorney Cole about some biz in the Florida and the Clearwater Downtown Partnership. She said she's going to check into it also, so that we're all on the same page on that topic. Then the other one is, let's see, there's discussion about removing the e-comments, but as you know, Pinellas County, I love to watch Pinellas County Commission meetings. They're very well organized. They really follow parliamentary procedure. Their attorney is right on it, and they also accept e-comments with no problem. And many people, they can't come down here to the meeting, but they do want to. That is their one way, because if we send you emails, I guess there's a way you can send an email and then still say you want it on the public record. Is that correct? It's still, you know, it's still nice to have the e-comments, and they're doing it with the county and no problem. I'm not sure if Fort Pinellas is doing. I can't remember. I watch those meetings too. I know Councilman Allbritton is on the Forward Pinellas board, but I can't remember at this moment if they take e-comments or not. Maybe you could address that. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Dick Maxwell. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I'm here to address my concern of the City of Clearwater in regard to an upcoming workshop you'll be doing about Bread and Roses Murder Clinic in this city. I have these questions for you. First, who are you listening to? Are you listening to reporters who at times quote people accurately, but at their own discretion misquote or give descriptions that are nuanced to support their own leanings? Are you listening to advocates of killing who are so zealous to deny that murder is evil that they continue to come to abortuaries to protect the sin that many of them have committed? Have you investigated the claims they make to determine their validity? Have you asked Clearwater Police how many calls have come from 1560 South Highland in recent years? Who made the calls? What was determined by officers? How many were baseless? And how many were based on lies? Who are you listening to? Question 2, what are you planning? I am not asking for my sake, but for yours. There have been a plethora of instances where municipalities and states have attempted to regulate the exercise of First Amendment rights, which have all failed drastically in the courts and sometimes included lawsuits that placed financial burdens on the jurisdictions. It would behoove you to consider well and with legal counsel how you are going to proceed in dealing with the situation. And question number 3, do you know who you are dealing with, who you're standing against? It is not us. It is God and His truth. Your Creator says this, it's not just those who hear, but those who do God's law that shall be justified. For when you, who try to ignore God's law, naturally do the things contained in the law, even though you never read God's word, you demonstrate that the work of the law written in your hearts and your conscience bears witness. And your own thoughts will accuse or excuse you in the day when God shall judge your secrets through Jesus Christ according to the gospel. This is God's word, and He is speaking to you. Some of you know in your hearts what is the right thing to do. Understand that in such a time as this, God has called you to stand for what He says is right. Jesus is King, and He provided a means for those who serve Him to delegate His authority in this nation. Our founding documents freely acknowledge that our right to establish this nation is recognized by God, that our individual rights are inalienable and given by God, and that God is our Creator. With First Amendment, our founders intended to keep our elected public servants from telling us how to worship and obey God, and in the very same sentence, it gives us the right to redress our grievances. That right implies a duty to do so when we, the people, see our elected servants in error.
Thank you.
We are here as representatives of Jesus Christ, and we admonish you for your eternal well-being to know who it is with whom you contend.
We're going to take a recess.
Thank you for your time.
council meeting for February 16th back to order. We are still on citizens to be heard. Is there anyone else to be heard at this time?
Hi, my name is Rowan Walker, and I'd like to speak about the Bread and Roses situation, but I'd also like to speak about some of the larger impacts that I think it has. I had prepared notes about laws and situations, and I think you guys have heard enough of that tonight. I'm a trans woman, and I moved here from South Carolina because I saw a lot of the hatred directed at LGBTQ people, particularly when it came to our rights as well as the rights of women. When I was graduating grad school, St. Petersburg Clearwater was at the top of my list for places to come and live because you guys have a reputation for safety. You guys have a reputation for being welcoming and for being a place where people who may not be able to find that elsewhere in this country can come and can be themselves without fear. The situation at Bread and Roses, I have been verbally harassed. I have been thrown up against cars. I have been bruised emotionally and physically. And I think that something that doesn't get talked about is the fact that it hurts that reputation. It makes people feel unsafe, not just when they're at Bread and Roses, but some of the protesters occasionally, if they get bored, they go across the street and yell at people shopping at Publix. The Regions Bank across the street has expressed concern about what could happen if a violent situation occurs. Somebody mentioned earlier that St. Pete and Clearwater should not just be known for their beaches, and I think that that's true. I think it should be known as a place, regardless of political stance, regardless of whether or not you're pro-life or pro-choice, where you can come and you can feel safe, where you can come and you can not be scared of having to walk to your car. You can come and not be scared of having to go to a doctor's appointment. You can come and not be scared of going to church. Whatever that looks like, I think it's important to remember that we are all here trying to live our best lives, and that it is not up to others how we get to do that. And once again, I would just like to reiterate that I have loved living here for the past 2.5, 3 years, and I don't want that to change. And I'm worried that if the situation continues to devolve and, you know, my picture gets plastered on more Facebook pages and that type of thing, that I won't have a choice. So I thank you for all the work that you have been doing, and I ask that you continue to make more efforts to keep all of us safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I have been asked to remove item 7.2 from consent. I would ask if there are any other consent items to be removed by the public or the city or city council. Otherwise, I'd ask for a motion to approve 7.1 through 7.3 and 7.12.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 7.2.
Approve First Amendment to contract for exchange of real property between Barnell Evans and Sandra Evans, owners of the City of Clearwater and the City of Clearwater, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same, together with all other instruments necessary to effect closing.
Chuck Lane, Economic Development and Housing Department. Any particular questions, Mayor, or you want me to?
I didn't ask for it to be removed. I think Ms. Lanza is behind you, and she can express why.
Well, I read all the documents, and I just wondered what the city's reason for wanting to make this swap.
Well, the city owns 918 Palmetto Ave, 918 Palmetto Street. It's adjacent to a daycare. The daycare owner leases it from us to use it as a playground for that daycare. They also own that 900 Palmetto, and they've asked us to switch them both. 900 Palmetto has more development opportunities, seem like a real good opportunity for the city.
Any questions for Mr. Lane? Anyone else to speak to item 7.2? Do I have a motion?
Move to approve item 7.2.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 8.1.
Approve the third amendment to an existing development agreement between Triprop Clearwater LLC and the City of Clearwater for property located at 400 Coronado Drive, formerly addressed as 421 and 431 South Gulfview Boulevard, which adds exhibits A through A2 to provide an updated legal description to include 1.1837 acres of the adjacent proposed to be vacated South Gulfview Boulevard right-of-way to the subject site and replaces Exhibit B with Exhibit B-2 to provide new conceptual site plans and sets new date by which time site plan approval must be obtained, and adopt Resolution 23-02.
It's not you, Ms. Clayton, because you haven't even talked yet.
Gina Clayton, Planning and Development. The item before you is the third amendment to an existing hotel development agreement. The primary change is the addition of 0.18 acres of land to the project that will be obtained through a right-of-way vacation of South Gulfview Boulevard. The amendment will include updated legal descriptions for the newer property, and conceptual plans are also included due to the design changes that will occur due to the added land. The number of hotel units is not changing, the height is not changing, and we're recommending approval.
Any questions for Ms. Clayton? Anyone from the public to speak to item 8.1? Mr. Margolis?
Resolution number 23-02, a resolution of the City of Clearwater, Florida, amending a development agreement between the City of Clearwater and Tripop Clearwater LLC as assigned by Allenick Properties, Anco Holdings LLC, and Nakana Holdings LLC, providing an effective date.
Have a motion.
Motion to approve agenda item 8.1.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. I'm getting attacked by
Did you get
bugs.
him?
I did.
Good for you.
Poor little fella. 8.2.
Approve amendments to the Clearwater Community Development Code addressing community gardens, detached dwellings, residential infill projects in the MDR district, fences, vertical mixed-use projects, landscaping standards, residential and commercial parking restrictions, signs, permit renewals, pre-application meetings, development agreements, definitions, US 19 zoning district and development standards, and downtown district and development standards, and pass ordinance 9643-23 on first reading.
Good evening, Lauren Matzke, Planning and Development. I am going to use my slides tonight.
Very good.
But since we've gone over this at work session, I will try to move through it relatively quickly. As discussed, there's several different topics or a wide variety of topics covered that are all amendments to the Community Development Code. Some were proposed changes for clarification, others were to address previous direction from City Council. The first set is all related to community gardens, in particular allowing them in the open space and recreation district, and then addressing the ability to do on-site sales either permanently in certain districts or temporarily in all the other districts. Additionally, the proposed amendment establishes certain standards for fences for this use in particular. The ordinance proposes two changes to the medium-density residential district, both of which are consistent with code provisions that are already in the low-medium-density residential district. The first change is to allow front setback flexibility for detached dwellings. Currently, as a level 1 for a flexible standard development application, which is the one that can be approved at the staff level, front setbacks are only allowed at 25 feet. This proposes to allow a reduction of 15 feet if certain criteria are met. The second proposed amendment is to add the residential infill development or residential infill project use as an option through level 1 application. Detached dwellings specifically would be the only use allowed through that type of application, and it would allow additional front setback flexibility, which would otherwise require a public hearing by the Community Development Board. There was some discussion, I didn't mention this at work session, but there was some discussion about the residential infill criteria, in particular a footnote that's found in all of the districts for this use in which it's permitted. It states that the development standards are guidelines, and our director, Gina Clayton, had discussed with the board at that time that it is our desire to take a more holistic look at the standards for residential infill in a future code amendment and bring that forward. So we recommend including that still within this amendment so there's consistency across all of the districts. Fences and walls are a major piece of this ordinance, in particular corner lots, and to allow 4 foot high along addressed front property lines, 6 foot high open style along the non-addressed property lines. So on Monday we talked through these graphics. This illustrates where currently the 4 foot maximum would be allowed, which is in those blue areas. This is where corner lots have 2 fronts. 6 feet, if you wanted a 6 foot fence, it would only be allowed within line with the principal structure or in that area that's fully white behind it. With this proposed amendment, there's a differentiation between the addressed front of a property and the non-addressed fronts. So those would be treated as sides specifically for fences. At council's direction, this would allow for up to a 6 foot high fence in between the principal structure and the side property line in the pink areas there on the bottom of the graphic. But if it were 6 feet, it would need to be an open style fence. And there's graphics included within the amendment to illustrate what that means. Let's see, sorry. The allowance for vertical mixed use projects would, the bonus, would allow projects like this to use their full density and intensity development potential. The exemption for artificial turf came up in a previous meeting, so that's been included. And I wanted to give a little bit more information on parking restrictions. The residential parking restrictions are not new, but the changes would extend them to certain residential areas of the downtown district. They were previously covered by these prior to the rezoning of some areas to make a unified downtown zoning district, which took place in 2018. And this was an unintended consequence because they were these areas were no longer considered to be residentially zoned properties. So this would just extend these same restrictions back to that. And then while researching it, this is when we noticed that the city's non-residential areas had no rules to keep property owners from, or anyone I suppose, from parking boats, trailers, or recreational vehicles in the street. And this is a safety concern, so it is proposed to prohibit the parking of that in the non-residential areas. There are 2 items proposed that fall within the sign code. The first is to prohibit the use of LED rope or ribbon lighting that is being used to outline doors or windows. The foundation of the city's sign regulations is the need for regulations to preserve the city as a pleasing, visually attractive urban environment, recognizing that tourism is a big part of our economic base. It is important to protect our community's image and create a sense of character and ambiance that distinguishes our city from others. The type of lighting proposed to be prohibited citywide is inexpensive to install, but it's also proliferating on our commercial corridors. It's commonly used more in older strip in our older strip retail malls. The lights are typically left on day and night, drawing attention, but in a non-aesthetically pleasing way. The second portion of the amendment addressing signs is renames the existing provisions for electronic changeable message signs to address those that are freestanding, and then adds new provisions for the same type of sign that would be attached to buildings. The criteria proposed are that they are limited to facilities in the downtown zoning district. The venues must have seating for 750 or more people. The message area must be integrated into the attached sign, and the attached sign must be located on a building canopy or a building marquee. And lastly, the general message may change no more frequently than once every 15 seconds. We've touched on both of these, and they're pretty self-explanatory for pre-application conferences and development agreements. US 19, the bike parking requirements were updated. One of the questions on Monday was about long-term bike parking and what would qualify. So long-term, I made sure to look it up. Long-term bike parking needs to be secure and weather protected. It can be located in buildings, under roof overhangs or awnings, in bike lockers, or within other similar structures. To provide additional security, since it's intended for those longer stays, multiple hours or multiple days. It needs to be in a visible location or monitored by a security camera and be lit at nighttime. Staff is recommending that larger projects first be reviewed through a formal site plan approval process prior to moving to building permits in the US 19 and, in the US 19 district where there's special provisions for these larger sites. And new flexibility is proposed where we've been reviewing multiple projects and think that there's value to adding this for our community. In downtown, as we've discussed, many of the amendments are very similar because they're intended to be consistent to the greatest degree possible. In downtown, however, there's more height transition, so there's some proposed changes to the building step back provisions to by right add a little bit more flexibility there. The second piece related to uses, density is established in the downtown redevelopment plan. Currently, there's no allowance for overnight accommodations in the South Gateway, so this ordinance corrects that within the code. It also proposes to allow the self-storage facilities as an accessory use in the downtown gateway, so expanding the areas where those could be provided. And then various amendments through the site and building design standards are proposed. And similar to US 19, there's multiple areas where new flexibility is proposed related to, again, the step backs, front setback reductions, and addressing other situations. And these are the rest of those. So the ordinance was presented to the Community Development Board, as we discussed, and they unanimously recommended approval with one change recommended, which was to address the fences for the community gardens use, allowing, instead of limiting the front to be 4 feet in height, it would be to allow up to 6 feet, but if it is taller than 4 feet, then it would also need to be the open style fence. So the current proposal in the ordinance is consistent, where other fronts are treated with the 4 foot high, but we can bring forward a change if it's the council's pleasure. And with that, I can answer questions.
Any questions for Ms. Matzke? Councilmember Scheib.
First of all, I really appreciated our one-on-one. It was very informative, and it gave me time to really process it and marinate it. But I have a few questions.
Of course.
So let's start with the ordinance on page 1618 referring to the changeable electronic lighting for the venue of 750 seats.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to clarify that that is particularly for the Capitol Theater, correct?
That would be the one venue that currently would qualify, but if another venue were constructed within downtown and met those same criteria, it would also be able to request that signage.
So being a corner building facing Cleveland and Osceola, which would be the Imagine Clearwater Park, are they allowed to have the dynamic, I guess, changing electronic marquee around the corner for both sides?
Would you mind? I'm going to ask Gina Clayton because she worked more in depth on this. I believe the way it's written, it's just one sign per property.
Is there any way we can change it since it's a corner property and facing two highly visible streets, and it would benefit the theater?
I think, I had some meetings with the theater about their signage proposal, and when we discussed it, there's some issues with that based on the public art that's on the building and how it would cover up the public art. And part of the one that they had proposed, and just from an aesthetic standpoint, and not that much vehicular traffic on those roadways, we landed on one, is what our recommendation is. If you want to change it, then that's up to the council.
I would, because I spoke to them recently, and I agree with their request, because it is a corner lot, and it is going to be facing Imagine Clearwater. So we're going to have that traffic that we don't have now, and I think it's a lost opportunity to not have that signage on Osceola.
The way it was proposed, they would actually have two signs or a portion of two signs on the same frontage. It wasn't the sign wasn't just on Osceola. It was proposed on the center of the theater, and then there's a part that's kind of notched out. The canopy doesn't go all the way, so also that sign was on the frontage facing Cleveland and going around too. So your typical corner lot might have a sign on each frontage or one that wraps the corner, not two, or portion of two on one frontage.
So, if that is something that they want, that those two signs, whether it's wrapped around or two separate signs, what is the process that we have to go through to allow them to do that?
You would need to make an amendment to the ordinance tonight on first reading.
Okay, and then one other thing I need clarification, not clarification, I was just kind of putting a question out there. I was wondering if we can decrease the number of the venue, and I'm just thinking outside the box here. Let's say post office vacates and we get a dinner theater, or one of those indie cinemas, those really great smaller version local cinemas, which seat 500, and then we have to go through this whole process. I was wondering if the council feels okay with decreasing that number so that we're not going through this again, in the hopes of in the future that we do have another venue that might be able to use it or want to use it. So I would like to make an amendment, let's say, to decrease, let's say, the seating to 300, and have the ability to have signage on each side of exposed exterior. How would I do that?
I believe that from a procedural standpoint, it would be appropriate to make a motion to amend the proposed ordinance as it pertains to Section 3-1807 of our Community Development Code, and specifically to reduce the number 750 to 500, or whatever number you would like. And then for the other portion of it, which can be part of the same motion, you're going to have to specify how you want it to be phrased.
Can I ask a couple questions about?
Well, what I'd like to do is get a motion and a second, and then we can discuss it.
Wait with this. Okay, so I make a motion to change the venue amount from 750 to, let's say, 350. I think that's a good number. And to allow said signage to be placed on either side of, how would I say that, frontage?
Are you talking multiple sides? If it's a corner lot?
If it's a corner, it would be, let's say, just to be very specific and clear, so it would be the front on Cleveland Street, and then the other side on Osceola.
So like the Ritz used to have a theater where they had, an opera singer and other things. It used to be a movie theater. In fact, when I first moved here, it was a triple X theater, so we've come a long way. Thank goodness. But I mean, it could be converted back into a theater potentially. I don't know how many it would seat, but that only has one frontage. Sorry.
You're talking about the Capitol Theater?
No, the Ritz.
Oh, the Ritz, okay.
Which is on Fort Harrison, just north of, I don't even know what we call it now. But it only has one frontage, whereas like the post office has 4, because it's a freestanding building.
Well, at least 3.
So anyway,
What are your thoughts?
well, no,
Do we have to have a second in order to discuss?
Yeah, we do,
Yeah,
so, but I need a motion first, and I don't have we can discuss it. I've always just allowed discussion first, so that we can
Okay.
coalesce around something, and then we can have a motion, which drives some people crazy from a Robert's rules, but
I don't think it's a problem.
it actually
really.
works better.
I like it.
Exactly. I don't think it's a problem. I mean, there's nothing statutorily that causes any problems there.
So good, Vice Mayor.
So I had a couple questions about this one, too. I was thinking, obviously, it seemed to be written specifically for Ruth Eckerd Hall, which is, it is what it is, but, so I had a question about how you arrived at 750 seats. I was wondering if it would apply to like Peace Memorial. Can 750 people fit in Peace Memorial? Or someplace at the Flag or Fort Harrison? Can they fit 750 people in there? And then I thought, you're talking about other little theaters. I'm familiar with some of the smaller theaters in Chicago, like the Annoyance, who has, this old building, they have Improv, and they might have 4 theaters. And so they might be able to fit 750 people in 3 or 4 little theater rooms there, but it's not one 750 venue. And so I just wanted some clarification. I'm all for entertainment venues and all that. I'm just wondering what we want, what the potential look is of a bunch of neon lights and marquees in the downtown, what could potentially be that way. And if we're gonna reduce it to 350, I think we even have more potential signage stuff. And then it seemed like with your explanation, I wasn't quite clear, but it seemed like you were saying, and I agree with Lena, I think if we're talking about Ruth Eckerd, the Capitol Theater, it would probably be beneficial to have some kind of digital signage on both sides. But it sounded like you're saying they really can. It's some kind of corner thing anyway that will wrap around.
No, they could. Look, I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. No, I'm saying what they showed me initially that they were thinking about had essentially two signs on the Cleveland street frontage. A portion of the second sign wrapped around. So they had, it wasn't truly on just both each frontage.
So there were lit lights on Osceola at some point.
Yeah, it kind of wrapped around. I'm not sure exactly how.
Okay.
It was at the corner, I think.
Well,
right?
they had a, kind of like a TV screen on the second floor, and then they had another ribbon around that wrapped around the canopy.
Mm-hmm.
So a portion of it was on Cleveland and a portion was on
Osceola. So it's a lit attention getter on both sides, right?
It's an electronic change.
And so you've already seen their depiction. So then why are they asking for two sides now? Something different?
My understanding was that they were only allowed one side. That was the last conversation I had with representatives from the Capitol Theater. And I would like to honor their request of having two. Maybe I'm focusing not on, maybe instead of focusing on the number, rather than it should be in the usage. So instead of 750 seats, it should be a venue of a theater, a venue such as a theater. If somebody wants to limit the amount of, lights and marquees, instead of assigning a number to make it exclusive, actually just assign a usage. I don't know if that clarifies it, but I just think that 750 is very limiting.
Well, how did you
It was
arrive?
designed to be limiting.
Yeah.
Correct. And I'm saying not to be so much, to be more open to
Right,
whatever's coming before us.
Right.
Councilmember Bunker.
Well, I was just wondering if we have a delightful 300-seat dinner theater opening and we had set it to 350 seats, how difficult is it to come back and just change that at another time?
It's ordinance preparation.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's that big of a deal. We should be able to adjust to these things in the future if we need to.
You got to be cautious, though, that you're not changing the code just all the time.
Right.
This particular sign issue has literally been going on for since the theater was completely refurbished. Since we've closed down Cleveland, it is harder for people to see upcoming attractions. I mean, I've even had people that live in Water's Edge that say they don't know what's coming to the Capitol Theater because of the signage. It isn't real efficient, but Councilmember Allbritton, they actually didn't talk to me about this, so I'm not carrying any water.
Well, I've been saying this for 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think it's ridiculous to have a movie theater that I can't see not a movie theater, but a entertainment venue that you don't know what's going on unless you want to go up and read the sign that's about that big, 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And I understand the aesthetics that are already there. They couldn't put a normal type of a theater thing on it, but I think that the little ribbon, something that would chase around, and I agree, if it's a corner lot, either have it wrap or have two separate signs on it. If it's not a corner lot, have one sign. I'm fine with that. And I think we're going to have some dinner. Hopefully we will develop and have some other entertainment venues on Cleveland Street that it would be nice to see what's coming up, without. We do have a pedestrian wall now, and some, the people walking down the street can see what's coming up would be very helpful, I think, in advertising what's coming up or what's playing that night. And I don't know about eliminating to a 750. I think you could probably, we should probably back off that a little bit because, like Mark was saying, if it's a dinner theater, I don't want to have 10 seats and have a ribbon light up there, but 300 seats, 350 seats would probably be fine. I'd be fine with that.
What do y'all think about having it lower? I mean, what are the pros and cons of moving it down to 500? And what about my comments about the Fort Harrison or Peace Memorial, or what structures do we have down there now that could fit 300, 500, 750 people in them?
Well, I guess, is a hotel really a venue? I would say.
Well, if you have an event,
probably
concert.
not a venue. This language was really kind of mirrored on what our attorney, Bill Britton, had written for our electronic changeable signs. And, hearing the conversation, it probably could be a little bit clearer. But, I mean, I think it depends on, do you want a proliferation of electronic message signs? I mean, the city has not taken that position. We've limited them to just for the freestanding ones to pretty much city-owned facilities, public facilities with 2,000 seats and more, and schools and places of worship. So I feel like if you start reducing the number of seats, then you're starting to open them up for more businesses instead of, how we originally intended.
What if you just say theater? It's a dinner theater, movie theater.
Theater venues, and that way we eliminate
Theater
the number.
venues.
What do you think about that? Eliminating the number assigned to it, but just identify specifically the venue that we would be interested in allowing that kind of lighting.
I mean, that's a possibility. I'd look to David. I think, if you want to do that.
Sure. I don't see any legal problem. It's really just a matter of making the motion to identify what change you'd like to see. So if the motion is to amend the proposed changes to section 3-1807 to replace the 750 seat proposed rule with a allowance for any sort of theater venue, then that would be a motion that could be made.
So that Francis Wilson Theater could have one.
Yeah.
I don't know how many seats they have.
But we're removing the seats.
Pretty large field.
Probably.
Right, yeah, it doesn't matter now.
400.
They're a theater, right, so, okay.
Okay. So can I just say so moved?
Improv theaters can be really small, really tiny community theaters.
West Coast Players is 100 seats.
Yeah, I mean, so again, I'm just, you know better pros and cons or things
You have
that,
our recommendation.
at 750.
Because I think the problem or the issue will be, everybody wants to be a theater, if they're having an improv and they're a restaurant, and they're going to try to start saying we're a venue, we're a theater, we're providing performance, then, are they entitled to the sign if you have no seats?
Yeah, and as a theater, does that mean, when you put that language in there, can you have a musical performance in a theater? I've been to places where it's just the orchestra plays, right? It's not acting.
Maybe we want to, if you want to allow that sort of thing, maybe let us work on it to see if we need a definition so that's.
So can we amend it on second reading, or would you rather continue this? We've already noticed for next meeting, and we can have first reading next meeting and second reading.
It's not going to make a big difference either way, candidly, because long before I joined the city, there was an attorney who believed that it was necessary for text amendments to exhaustively lay out in the title of the ordinance every change, which means that if any amendment is made, it will likely require me to change the title of the ordinance, among other things. And because the title has already been advertised, we will have to kind of restart the first reading regardless. So it's not going to matter one way or the other.
So I think it would be better to continue this item until the next meeting so that you can Gina, I think you're hearing some level of consensus. But you can refine it so that it's done properly.
Excellent.
So I'd like to be clear, theaters, I mean, a theater that has fixed seating in it, I mean, is that what you're looking for? You're not looking for the restaurant that has mic night?
Dinner theater, right, yeah. So you want to say fixed seating?
I don't know, I want to make sure that I understand.
There has to be a criteria that
Right.
they can.
Right,
So primary purpose would be a theater, not a.
not a church?
Yeah.
I don't think Peace is going to put a flashing.
No, I don't think
Churches
so
already
either,
allow,
but,
right?
you know,
Places of worship
Yeah,
can't
worship
have a
can
lot.
anyway.
yeah, okay.
But we'd be lucky to have a bunch of venues down here,
Mm-hmm.
big theater. So,
And you know,
I don't mind the lights.
and I always said, that kind of thing is a good thing for
Foot
the
traffic.
downtown because it makes it exciting and
Okay, so just to be clear, primary purpose is the theater, you don't want to have a limitation on the number of seats, and you want to allow signage on each street frontage.
Correct.
If you
Beautiful.
have a
If
triple
there's-
front, if
if
you have a
there's double
triple
frontage.
front lot, you get 3 electronic message signs.
Well, the library, I mean, the post office would have 3, because one's an alley. I mean, I'm just
Not
trying
really
to
an
think,
alley, it's a street back there.
not that runs in between Station Square and,
Oh, no, not the sidewalk. The street
that's what I
behind
mean. So they'd have 3 frontages.
Right.
We can limit it to 2. It's just that one's not enough.
I think you'd limit it to 2.
Yes.
But you want them on the different frontages, you're not talking about having 2 on the same frontage.
Correct. Do you want another recess?
No, but I'll let the attorney explain. It cannot be continued to the next meeting if it is continued, because we will have to restart the noticing process. So you're looking at March 16th.
So the March 13th work session and March 16th will be first reading. So if there's a motion to continue to that effect, that would be the appropriate time. We were also talking about whether, in fact, the title will need to be changed. As Ms. Baskey pointed out to me, it is possible that if this is the only change that's made, maybe I could leave the title intact, but I know there are other issues that we've talked about, and so I would feel more comfortable just continuing it to the March 13th work session and the March 16th first reading. That gives us time to re-advertise. It also gives us time to work on any amendments to the title itself.
So do you have enough guidance on this particular issue, or do you need more?
No, I don't think.
Okay. Are there other issues that people want to raise?
I have another one.
Okay.
So the other one is about the LED ropes, banning the use of them. This ban brings me great concern. In large part, it affects small businesses. And this cord ribbon LED lighting is a viable, affordable way to illuminate and promote their small business. And just yesterday, I was driving Gulf to Bay, and of course, I'm paying attention to the road, but I could still count 17 small businesses that use it. And so I did reach out to some small businesses, and they feel that it's another way to confine their ability to thrive and to promote their businesses. So I'm concerned about banning something that affects small businesses without consulting them, especially since it's an aesthetic thing. It's not a safety code, it's an aesthetic. And, you know, I'm a fashion designer and wearable artist, so aesthetics is very important to me. But it should never be at the cost of a small business being able to run smoothly and to do well. I also understand what we're trying to avoid. There are those businesses that do summon up some kind of negative feeling, right? The blacked out windows with the neon flashing lights, and I can see the negative perception. But just banning this completely like this, it kind of reminds me of like the teachers punishing the whole class for 1 or 2 problematic children. I didn't appreciate it then, and I don't appreciate it now, and I really would at least hold off until we let the small business community know and get their feedback, because this will affect them. And so at this point, I'm not comfortable moving forward with this plan.
Vice Mayor.
I appreciate those comments. I think they're important. I would say, I had some comments about the rope lighting. One of my questions was, and it's kind of the opposite, it's a lot of the residents on Sand Key do not like that blue lighting on the Sand Key Marriott. And I had a question about the outlining LED. What's the definition of outlining windows? Is it 4 sides? Because theirs just goes all the way across.
That's an architectural feature, though.
But, yeah, I mean, I don't know, we talked a little bit about the distinction, so I did have some people call me and say, hey, get rid of those blue LED lights, but anyway, I wanted to ask about that. But I think, more importantly, I think Councilmember Teixeira's point is valid in that, the feedback I get from small businesses, like streets like Drew, and downtown on the beach is about, this was about the sidewalk signs or sandwich boards or A-frame signs or whatever you talk about, is that they want to advertise today's special, today's soup of the day or whatever's on sale, or they want to stick out a feather thing on Drew Street, one of those feather signs like today is whatever it is, or come on in sale today, because their businesses are so far set back. And Drew is a dangerous road. It's like you never have time to turn to the side and look and see what businesses are there, or what's on sale or what's going on. And so if we're banning lights, and my question was, are those sandwich boards allowed uniformly throughout the city? Because I do see them a lot on the beach and wonder, are they allowed down Drew or, other, down Cleveland, so that was.
They're allowed in the downtown district and on the beach.
And that's it? Not down Drew?
They're allowed on private property, on commercial, but not on the sidewalk. They have to be by their door. So like if you're walking down under a strip center, you can see the sign, but they're not allowed on the
Right.
sidewalk.
But again, if you're driving down Drew, it's, 20 yards from the street to the sidewalk of that business, maybe, at some places. But if we're going to restrict that kind of signage a bit, if we're going to, and I don't particularly care for LED rope lighting, but I appreciate individuality. So if we're going to look at that, look at the sandwich boards, and I've heard a lot of feedback a few years ago about the amount of lettering on windows on a storefront. You had to, so the cutout sticky lettering is regulated. What are you offering? What are we offering and allowing that helps a small business be successful and attract patrons to their business? That's what I would say. What can they do in those challenging parts of our city?
Well, they would be permitted to do any signs compliant with our sign code. I don't know if any of them have had any conversations with us. We also have the comprehensive sign program, which requires a heightened aesthetic, but has allowances for more signs than the base, allowed. So, that would vary by property. But to your point, like a lot of the temporary signs, Clearwater does not have a proliferation of those because they're not allowed, whereas when you go through other communities, you'll see a lot of the feather signs or the flags over, what used to always be overused car lots, things of that nature, and we don't have that. And that's part of what, if you think about the major commercial corridors where a lot of these would be deployed, these are the main roads that our tourists use to get to our beach, and our citizens also drive, and there is a compelling need for, an overall aesthetic in that regard.
The visual clutter that used to be on Gulf to Bay and elsewhere has changed drastically. I don't particularly like the rope in the windows. They tend to be in some of the smoke shops and stuff like that I'm not real crazy about anyway, but, they're allowed. I think it might behoove y'all to have a one-on-one on signage and kind of the history and some of the pictures that we have going back on Gulf to Bay and elsewhere with billboards and other things. I mean, we allow the feathers when a business originally opens for how long?
Well, it'll take me a moment.
Well,
But yeah, there are allowances for grand openings.
right,
and other
it's
special events.
temporary.
Yeah.
But, you know, I would challenge everybody to drive down to, and I'm not gonna name municipalities.
I'm down 19.
Well, no, just other places and look for some of the visual, you know, clutter and whatnot. I mean, sandwich boards on Drew, you couldn't read them from Drew, certainly shouldn't be reading them from your car as you're driving by. But I mean, we have had, I can't tell you the discussions we've had on sandwich boards. Unbelievable. And how they had to be done professionally versus ones that, you know, were done by hand. And we had some really good examples of bad examples. And those occurred over a very long time frame, right? Ms. Clayton, Mr. Delk?
Absolutely.
Hours of scintillating discussion.
Well, I mean, it's, again, I appreciate you suggesting the one-on-one, and that's okay, but again, I think, where's the evidence that we're gonna reach out to some small business owners and get some feedback and suggestions and help shape it from them? I mean, they're the ones who this pertains to. I want them to be successful, and so what options do we have?
Councilmember Allbritton.
So we've been talking about this for years, for decades. Last time the mayor was mayor, it had been talked about probably 10 years at that point, because I know the chamber had an attorney working on making changes for the business community, because we had a lot more restrictive sign code back then. And I can tell you that the new one the downtown has now is what we were looking for 10 years ago. It's a very good sign. I think all the little bells and whistles and the hot points got taken care of, and I think it's very advantageous for a business and very...
It's an Amber Alert.
Very fair, you know, for us not having a lot of gaudy stuff, but at the same time, it's good for the businesses. You know, the sandwich board thing we've talked about for years and years, as the mayor said, you know, it's a pedestrian thing. It's not, you're not gonna look at a sandwich board going down 19. So that was another thing we talked about in depth, was the difference between a pedestrian corridor and a Drew Street or a US 19. They should be able to have bigger signs because of the speed of the traffic, but they shouldn't have all the stuff that, you know, you're not going to be able to read anyway. So might be good to just go over the new sign ordinances a couple of years ago that we put in, and so everybody kind of gets up to date with that, and maybe we could. I mean, I'm okay with with some businesses having, you know, the windows and the doors. I think, but I don't want to see everybody having them. I think you know, there gets to a point where then it gets, nobody can differentiate anyway. So what's the use of having them? But
So what is the consensus on the LED rope lighting? I'm hearing to eliminate it or allow it. Councilmember Allbritton?
yeah, I'd say probably I would allow it because some businesses have it. Not all businesses have it. It's not, to me, it's not problematic right now. Maybe, I don't know what kind of restrictions you would put on there, whether if you have a business that has a whole bunch of glass windows, whether they can put it on every one of them, I don't know. Maybe they put them on 50% of the ones they have, and maybe that would help. But
Councilmember Bunker?
Well, I do think that they look tacky for the most part. And to the mayor's comment earlier, there's main street that I drive down as I'm leaving Clearwater, I go, oh, okay, I've left the city now, because the neighborhood just changes. And I think things like that is a large part of it. So I would prefer that we not allow them, but I think I'm outnumbered.
I'm not for them. I don't know that they truly bring business to anybody. They may draw attention, but I don't think they bring dollars in the door. And I think the aesthetic is lousy. So.
There has to be more creative ways to drum up business and attention.
I'd like to add some more comments.
Go ahead.
You know, I was, and I think I am, the only small business owner here. And so I know the challenges of having a small business in this city. One of the things that I have heard in the last 8 years is that, especially in downtown, there's this pressure to be cookie cutter. Nothing tacky, nothing too bright, not too much lettering. And I think that what we're doing is we're tying our hands behind our backs when we're still babies trying to walk. And what we need is the obstacles to be pulled away. I understand that that could be tacky, and I would not be opposed to having some solutions, a middle of the ground, but it's not just, you know, when you say it doesn't bring in money, well, if you're in a small strip joint, small strip
plaza.
Okay, and I know that's what everybody's implying, I guess that's why I'm saying it, but if you are in a small strip plaza where the lighting is bad, the buildings are old, so any modifications will be needing with permits and electrical, you know, overhaul. These are big expenses for small businesses. And landowners probably are not gonna, the property owners are not gonna wanna, you know, cooperate. And I'm telling this from my experience. It is very complicated for a small business owner to do something as simple as a sign. So I understand the tackiness of it. I understand that. But instead of just banning it, let's work with the small businesses, because the feeling is that every time they come up with something that works, it's taken away. So if it's the tackiness that you want to decrease, okay, so let's control the colors. Instead of having neon colors, let's just make it white. Because I had it on my establishment, the white twinkling lights, which I used for Valentine's and I turned it red, and for St. Patty's I turned it green, and it was not tacky. And I appreciated having that option to do it. Instead of asking my landlord, you know, to change the whole electrical system to have outdoor lighting. So I guess I just want everyone to really think of the impact that it's going to be on the small business, and then maybe just be open to solutions rather than just outright banning it. That's all I'm asking.
If I may clarify, lights used for holidays, is basically what you've described, is not considered a sign, therefore it would not be covered by this prohibition.
But I use the ropes. They just put the twinkling function, and I had that flexibility.
What about the possibility of the white? I mean, I like, you're making a great argument, I think. You know, it's certainly from experience, you know, but what if we made them only white rope lights? That would give some uniformity. I don't know, then you could turn on different colors for different
And are we
occasions.
grandfathering it, or just boom, bam,
Right.
they're off? That's the
Right,
question I've
that's a
received
good, but
lot
if
of.
you counted 17, that's a lot of,
Just on Gulf.
right.
Were they going to be grandfathered, or they would be eliminated? They'd be eliminated, correct?
Yes, that is
Yeah.
correct. There was no provision to deal with, in part, it's difficult to determine when did you purchase them, when did you
Who
install
owns
them.
it, yeah.
Google Street View doesn't go back every year.
Also, it's a plug-in. It's not like in a big structure
Right.
that would be subject to grandfathering.
Do you know of any, like, middle ground ordinances in other municipalities that have kind of a similar intent to take care of the tackiness, but allow a cheap way to advertise your business or draw attention? No, don't know.
I don't. I think some communities have more creative people.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish we could at least reduce it. I think you're talking about an enforcement nightmare. And at some point, you also have to think about that. we could put something in that's creative, but now we're gonna have to hire additional people just to enforce it. So, this isn't a hill I'm gonna die on.
Why don't you just leave it out for now? If it becomes a problem, we can talk about it then.
Well, they think it's a problem now, right?
There are a lot more now than there were a few months ago when this was originally discussed and added in.
I mean, that's why they're bringing it to us.
Have there been complaints from residents about neon lights in storefronts?
It's not neon.
Or,
Just
I mean,
to clarify,
oh,
it's
yeah.
neon, you know, of
Yeah.
course, unfortunately, it's kind of a dying
Oh,
art,
that's right.
but neon signs would be allowed,
Okay.
so.
Which I think is tacky.
So,
Subjective.
see,
But not a significant amount of, so this is more the planning department and your desire for aesthetics and updating the code than it is resident-driven.
this is part of, you know, looking at what are the purposes of the sign code. And that was a lot of what I tried to read into the record. You know, that's why we have a sign code is for aesthetic reasons, for, you know, keeping us unique from others in that regard, so. But no, I did not receive any phone calls complaining about it.
So what's your pleasure on the LED? I'm hearing eliminated.
No, one.
Is that where you were, Councilmember
I
Walden?
think so.
Okay. Well, then that's 3. You live with that? Sure. Okay. All right. And then we'll work on the language for the marquees.
Yes, but someone will still have to make a motion to continue the.
I know. I also have to open it up to the public.
I had 2 other little areas.
All right.
How did we land on the fence height for the community gardens? Are they allowed at 6 foot? Or?
That would need to be part of a motion as well.
Okay. I think for, you know, again, my experience of being in the community garden here in Clearwater, that they need it over 4 feet for protecting their assets in there.
I'm fine with going to 6. I mean, I think if somebody wants to get over a 6, they're going to get over a 6. As long as it's open fencing, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, we don't allow closed 6-foot other places, right?
Not in front of a primary
Yeah.
structure, assuming that this passes.
So this is a carve-out for community gardens.
Yes.
And then the other thing I had was, if you can just talk just a little bit, I forget if I asked on Monday, but why is it a good thing to expand the areas for storage unit businesses in that east gateway? Why is it okay to have them there, do you think?
Well, in that one, we were discussing that happens to be a location where there's a unique building.
Oh, that's right, the SBC building, is that why, or that Verizon Frontier, yeah.
This time. So that was part of that recommendation. The code currently limits any location where they would be allowed within downtown, it would limit it to 25% of the overall use. So, in some regards, we were talking about, that became a factor as we were looking at, you know, apartments or condominiums needing some sort of additional storage potentially for their residents, that kind of back and forth. You know, we've looked at other communities, including St. Pete, which has a similar provision, but in this regard, you know, this is just a recommendation. It's not, you know, it's like the others. It's up for consideration.
So is the storage freestanding or attached to something? That's what I needed to
It's
clarify.
inside, you're talking about inside the building, right?
Yeah.
Well, it would need to be fully enclosed. There's certain standards for that, so it's not, you know, exposed to outside, no doorways or things like that. But it would be part of a larger project. So
Part
not
of
a freestanding self-storage
Okay.
facility operating individually.
At the Frontier area, it would have to be part of something, so it could be storage that goes up there, next to the affordable housing that's going by the community garden, and then it also has to be partnered with something else next to it. Okay.
You couldn't come in and request to just use that building for self-storage with no other
Okay. Mixed use, some kind of something.
The
And
developer's
25%.
trying to do something with that building.
Yeah, okay. Okay,
But, so that was, in this instance, similar to the marquee signs, there was a particular venue or facility building in mind.
yeah,
That was
yeah, an opportunity. There we go.
Thank
Okay. And what kind of structure might be married with it? Like, would it be,
I mean, residential,
retail
could
or-
be
okay.
office or retail.
okay, anything? Okay,
Yeah, it doesn't specifically have to be a residential and a non-residential use the way it's written. Be anything plus.
Be a car wash and a storage unit? Ugh.
Other things
Those
like
are
that
jobs,
there-
those are good jobs, you know. Ugh.
Well, car washes
Aren't allowed there, okay.
are already prohibited in downtown, so
Or gas station.
gas stations are.
I'm okay with it then. I mean, I just wanted to understand. Yeah.
Anyone from the public speak to this item? Do I have a motion to continue item 8.2 to March 16th?
I make a motion to move this agenda item to March, what was it, last year?
16th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. 9.1. Thank you, ladies. Mr. Ruggles.
Sorry, just making sure we had the proper.
Oh, there wasn't an e-comment for this last item, I'm sorry.
8.2.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
go ahead.
Kathy Flaherty submitted a comment. I think this needs to be discussed by the council so the community at large can hear the changes being considered. Any changes that prohibits existing approved conditions, signage should be grandfathered in. The city currently grandfathers in all dumpster placements prior to 1999, when the council approved an ordinance restricting the dumpster's placement. No language of grandfathering is mentioned in that ordinance, but they are nonetheless. If the council is going to approve an ordinance, you must be consistent with the enforcement of those ordinances. Selective code enforcement is wrong. Picking and choosing which laws to enforce is not part of the city manager or council members' authorized duties. Enclose all dumpsters and get them away from the stormwater drains and off the city easements as required by the existing ordinance.
Okay, item 9.1.
So we're on to second readings. Ordinance number 9650-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, vacating east 5-foot right-of-way easement located on Lot 16, Bayside Subdivision, Clearwater Beach Island, according to the map or plat thereof, as recorded in Plat Book 23, page 17 of the Public Records of Pinellas County, Florida, providing an effective date.
Anyone from the public to speak to item 9.1? Do I have a motion?
Move to approve agenda item 9.1.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 9.2.
Ordinance number 9651-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, vacating the rear platted 5-foot public utility easement located on Lot 6 in the north 30 feet of Lot 5, Block 69, Mandalay, according to the map or plat thereof, as recorded in Plat Book 14, pages 32 through 35 of the Public Records of Pinellas County, Florida, providing an effective date.
Anyone from the public to speak to item 9.2? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve agenda item 9.2.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 9.3.
Ordinance number 9652-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, vacating the north 30-foot ingress-egress easement located on Lot 1, Block A, Earl Scheib Commercial Center, according to the map or plat thereof, as recorded in Plat Book 74, page 22 of the Public Records of Pinellas County, Florida, providing an effective date.
Anyone from the public to speak to item 9.3? Have a motion?
Move to approve item 9.3.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 10.1.
Provide direction on the future Clearwater Gas Systems Propane Business Division.
Good evening, Brian Langill, Interim Director for Clearwater Gas System. So this item is to talk about our propane business, and we did have one-on-ones on this item last month. We discussed the profit and loss overall, that we're losing money on our propane operations. So we've operated a propane business for over 30 years. We grew it a lot back in the 90s, and currently we have a little over 2,000 customers that we have right now.
And primarily, most of them are in the county, unincorporated, Pinellas and Pasco County. We currently have 95 customers that are within the city of Clearwater right now. So a very small percentage of those propane customers reside within the city of Clearwater. So with the revenues and expenses, we've experienced over $600,000 per year losses, and 1 year in 2021 it was over $800,000. And so we're recommending that we go out and get a business valuation for the worth of the propane company, and then go out for an RFP in order to see what potential buyers are out there to take over. There are other buyers in the area that can take over those customers. They would not be left out on their own. They would be, taken over by a company that does that on a daily basis right now. And the employees that we have within the gas system that do propane, it's 8 of them, they would be absorbed into our natural gas operations. We have more vacancies right now than we need to absorb employees, and we can keep them at their current position versus having to do any type of demotions or anything like that. They would just have to train and learn the natural gas side, and they would have that opportunity to do that. So and we did get some letters from, or emails from customers. I'll say that it was very limited. We got, I have a total of 5, which includes the emails that went to City Hall as well. So we did not get a lot of public response from the letters that we sent out notifying our customers that we were going to take this to council tonight.
So I got 2 today, and I forwarded them on to you and the entire council.
Yeah.
Both of those were from one neighborhood, where they're using a tank for the whole neighborhood.
Yeah, some of our customers are on a loop system where we have a big tank in front of the subdivision, and then we have, just like we do with natural, we have a piping system all around in that little neighborhood. We only have a handful of those loop systems, though, just less than probably 50 customers.
But whoever services that is going to service it the same way we do today, right?
Yes, they would continue it that way.
Because they were concerned that they were going to have to put individual tanks in, and that wouldn't be the case.
No, we would list all those assets to be sold. Now, I would expect that the next propane company to take it over that way would make the most sense, because it's already in the ground there. It's more efficient to do it that way than it is to fill up each individual customer. And, we could increase our price to be a little more profitable, but we would have to add at least $2 a gallon to the cost of the propane in order to do that. And we, with 2,000 customers versus our 30,000 natural gas customers, it's just too low of a customer base for us to continue that operation and be profitable, just as a standalone propane entity.
Well, I'm for taking the next step and getting evaluation and then coming back, so.
I am too.
Agree.
Anyone from the public to speak to item 10.1? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve agenda item 10.1.
Do I have a second?
Well, it's just direction, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's just direction.
Yeah.
Direction was to,
Council, the item is asking providing direction, so you're not really approving,
Okay.
just
make a motion to proceed with the,
just say direct staff to proceed with the next steps would be perfect. If that's okay.
motion to,
No motion.
nothing, go ahead.
I'll second that, go ahead.
10.2.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
provide an update while Mr. Maxwell approaches the podium. First, I want to reiterate that, as the mayor said previously, that we are continuing to recycle everything that's eligible for recycling at this moment. Secondly, it has always been staff's intention to provide a full report in terms of everything that we've uncovered as we go through this research to see what it is that happened on recycling and what are the best steps to do in moving forward. That's part of why we are engaging in a consultant to help us on the next best steps. But I also realize that it's important to keep the public updated, and council, as we continue to learn things. This is a complex issue, as we have all discussed. And some of the things that we have learned throughout this extensive research that we are doing is that we now know that going back to 2019, we have been recycling significantly less than what it is that we collected. We also know that that was not something that we were aware of going back to 2019 until recently. I understand that we have been researching this for over a month now, and this news continues to be significantly unfortunate. But it's also important to note that all of the people that were responsible for making these decisions and implementing this program are no longer here. So the staff is trying to put together the pieces based on invoices and data collected by our partners and our vendors to come up with a story as to what it is that happened, and that is why this is taking this time. So I wanted to provide that update prior to this conversation. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, we'll get to those. Let's let Mr. Maxwell go through everything, and then we can ask questions, and I know we have folks from the public.
It's Mike Maxwell, Chief Innovation Officer and Interim Solid Waste Director. On Monday, we talked a little bit about the different options, and actually at our previous meeting as well, related to refunds or credits. We've provided you some a stepped down version, which really accounts for the difference between the disposal cost at Pinellas County Solid Waste versus the disposal cost at the processing plant. That amount total is $177,056.91 for the service area that the city collects and serves within our boundaries. The full amount, not just looking at the disposal price, but looking at the entire amount that the residents paid the city, is $1,123,417.91. So that is the full 6-month version of a credit. We also provided some information on Safety Harbor and Bel Air, both a step down again version and a full refund version. For those two, our preference would be to have some conversations with those communities to find out what issues they have, what needs they'd like to express to us as it relates to credits, because the system is a little different. With that, I'll answer any questions if I can.
Questions? Excuse me.
So sorry. I'm sorry.
Councilmember Allbritton.
Okay, so I just learned today, as most of us did, that this is going to go beyond what we originally thought, the 6-month issue of recycling. So I think we need to not make a decision tonight on things that are based on old data. I think we need to get all the data in and figure out where we are. So I think I would prefer to continue this when we get all the data in, and then decide it's going to be a different animal, what we're looking at. I mean, we have screwed up, and now we're finding that may have lasted longer than what we thought it did. So I want to get to the bottom of it and find out exactly how long it has been and exactly, what has been going on. And maybe we have a discussion up here on what we do with the program. Maybe we have to put together a different program that works better. I mean, I like one of the comments that I heard tonight, maybe we go to a centralized recycling system or area. I don't know. I think we ought to get more data before we decide what we're doing tonight.
Vice Mayor.
I agree. I think we need to wait until we get more information in light of new information today. But I would say the question I was going to ask is, we haven't communicated yet with Bel Air and Safety Harbor about what their expectations might be about making things right just yet, and probably because we don't know exactly how far back.
Yeah, there's been some communication with both parties. I think because the systems are so different, one includes collection, one does not, I think it probably is a situation where we need to all three get together and have some conversation to figure out what's fair and equitable between all parties.
Okay.
mean, I think we need to get to the bottom of how long it's actually been occurring. It is, I think we're all disappointed and angry. But as Ms. Boyer pointed out, the folks that were overseeing this are no longer with us, which makes it a little more difficult forensically to figure out all the ramifications. I'll reiterate what I said before, we got to right the ship first, which I think we have done. At some point, we're going to have to get more competitive contracts if we decide to continue the program. I think we'll also have to decide whether we're going to continue servicing the other two municipalities. You know, we're going to have to service our municipality first, and then if we have capacity and it makes sense, then we can do the others and continue to be good partners as we've cooperated on many things over the years with both of those municipalities. But if the rates stay as high as they are, those have to be passed along too. Just like the decision we made with gas, our propane, we can't be, you know, we've got to be covering expenses. So, you know.
And we need much more information on what the hell is going on. I was all for giving a full refund because I think anything short of that would be a slap in the face, but we all got sucker punched tonight, I think, finding that this went back to 2019. So we need to find out what's going on. Can I ask what the progress is in finding a manager for solid waste?
So we have an assistant director that's been appointed. If you'll recall, through the process last year, the former city manager eliminated a department head. So we are not recruiting currently for a department head. Part of that plan was to have two assistant directors, of which we now have. That was implemented, and take the time to determine what we're going to do with that department. And what we meant by that was, are we going to leave it as a department, or is it potentially going to be a part of the new Public Works Department, or merge with other departments? So we are still evaluating that. So we are not currently searching for a department head, but the two assistant directors have been put in place.
Well, are we hiring a controller?
We have been. Controllers are one of the very difficult positions to recruit for right now. We've increased the salary multiple times. I was just told today that we do have some good candidates, or a good candidate that we are pursuing. So we are.
We've been without one since 2020, right?
Yes.
We lost our controller in 2022.
Okay.
We had a different controller, a long-term controller that left in, I believe it was 21. The senior accountant then took that position and then left in 22. Right now, we are without the controller and the senior accountant. The senior accountant, I believe, starts next week or the week after. We do have a manager position, which is below the assistant director level, that we are hiring currently, and we're just going through background checks on that right now. So hopefully we'll be much better staffed by the end of February than we have been.
All right. When we were campaigning back in 2020, I was told about the plans for our own recycling MRFs, I believe they're called. And we had the money for that. We were working on that, and then that ended. Is that still a viable thing to do? Because the money is still there for that project, isn't it?
Oh, I can tell you that, that's part of the purpose of bringing on the consultant. There's nothing that's off the table. So we are going to look into all of those things and bring forward recommendations.
All right.
I think, though, just for understanding, back then when that was being discussed, and frankly, it has been being discussed for over a decade. So before I left in 2012, they were discussing building one, and it never occurred. But what has changed dramatically still, and keep that in mind, is the market and the fact that China is no longer accepting it. And so it's going to have to be something that's going to be embraced somehow nationally because right now it's just a different market than it has been dramatically. Councilmember Teixeira.
I'm agreeable with waiting until we know what we're up against.
Mr. Margolis, did you have something to add?
Not right now.
Okay.
I would like to let you also know that the TMC in March is supposed to be talking about the countywide MRF, the potential for a countywide MRF. We will certainly push for some final decision sooner rather than later so that we can understand where we're at from a countywide perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell.
Yeah.
Citizens to be heard?
I'm Mr. Haluba, and I believe everybody sitting on the dais is agreeable to a refund. Problem is from when to when. And if we really want to know when this problem started, it started when you put those ugly yellow and blue bins at everybody's residence and started charging them without their permission a recycling fee, thinking that that was a popular thing to do. It never was. That's why the recycling is contaminated, because just like Mr. Hibbert has alluded to, somebody's got an overflow of trash, where's it going to go? It's going to go in that blue bin and contaminate everything. I have no problem with the refund being issued a credit on a utility bill, except for people who are previous customers that don't have a bill to credit to. They need to be written a check. And you got to figure that one out. And Mr. Hibbert, you are correct. The recycling business has changed, probably because of China. But the fact of the matter is this never worked. Going back to 2018, we had the exact same problem. Citizens came forward and said, hey, the garbage truck is picking up my recycle bin. They didn't even try to hide it. So for some of us, the recycling fee is just another money grab by the city of Clearwater, because there's no way to opt out of it. So basically, you're held your feet to the fire. You have to pay it, and if you don't, they'll cut everything off. It's extortion, much like reclaimed water and much like the minimum water use. But this refund needs to happen sooner rather than later. And I hear all of you tonight saying, oh, we got new information. Oh, we didn't know about that. Well, why didn't you? You're going to kick this can down the road, hoping everybody will forget about it. But in the meantime, we're all paying for a recycling fee. And Mr. Hibbert, you can sit there and say that it's all being recycled now. That is not a statement that you can make with any measure of truth. We need to have the refund now and do another one later if you have to. Not going to wait for you to figure it out, because you won't.
Well, I'd like to give a little history, Lisa Lanza. Way back when, we had, the county wanted to build another resource recovery plant in North County on the Eldridge well field. This was in the late 80s, I think, or early 90s, maybe mid-80s, I don't know. But we actually created a group of people called Citizens Against Incinerators. And it was a big event. We were young and we were enthusiastic, had a lot of energy. And we did stop a lot of meetings, and we stopped the county from building that second resource recovery plant. And the county said the only way we can do this is so we have to have recycling, and we're going to have to charge you for it. And we said, that's fine. Well, and we supported it. I was, at the time, with the League of Women Voters. I was on the board of Sierra Club. And, but it was all the environmental groups that got together. And so we had a really good cohesive team at that time. So Clearwater, as I recall, was the first city to adopt recycling and to pay for it. And then I think Largo came in after that, and then we cut the deal with Bel Air and Safety Harbor. But, we continue to lead. We are the first city to have the stormwater tax. But again, it was the same group of people that said, we wanted to protect the environment, and we just worked so well together. It was the age, maybe the time, I don't know what, but we got a lot of good things done. Now, I also hear that the county's talking about building a resource recovery plant in North County. So, we're talking here 25 years later, 20 years later, we may end up getting that resource recovery plant in North County. I hope we don't. I think we just need to be a lot more creative about our garbage and not creating it. And those compost bins that the city gave us were great. I heard the Environmental Advisory Board, I heard people say they don't work. Come to my house. They work. I've said this before. I've been recycling my household kitchen scraps, excluding dairy and meat, since 1992. And it's not the typical compost that people think of with worms and stuff. It's a different, I also put my shredded paper in there. I get oak leaves from the neighbors because I don't have any oak trees in my yard. And what else do I put in there? But, and I use that terrible soil we have. I layer with it. And I think you all know I was an environmental specialist, and I have a degree in agriculture and natural resources, my 50-year career was in that. So I've observed people internationally. I was a technical expert in agriculture for American National Standard Institute. I've traveled all around the world, and I've seen what works and what doesn't. And you do have to experiment. But I've been experimenting since '94, and I got a great system, and those bins work. So if anybody wants to know how to use, keeping household scraps out of the bins is
Thank you, Ms. Lance.
the great way. And it doesn't smell, and no rodents either.
All right. Anything else, Ms. Boyer?
Yes,
Mr. Margolis? Item 12.1, use of interest earned on the ARPA funds. Vice Mayor.
So I was just, I had asked, as we talked about ARPA and our $22.4 million that hasn't all been doled out, that interest is building. And so I'm not sure that it needs to be council direction on how to use that ARPA interest, but I'd just like it to be known. I think that ARPA interest should stay with the ARPA buckets that we have set out for ARPA funding. And so I see Mr. Ravens is here. Was wondering, do you know how much ARPA interest we have accrued as of now about?
Jay Ravens, Finance Director. As of the end of December, it approximated about 230,000. So it's probably over 250,000 at this
Okay.
point.
Okay.
Where did you plan to put it?
Essentially, the interest would accrue in whatever funds the monies have been moved to, which include the 181 Special Program Special Revenue Fund and the Capital Improvement Fund. Capital Improvement Fund interest goes back to the general fund. Any money that has remained in the general fund would also accrue in the general fund. And then it would just be special programs such as possibly grant programs that have been moved to that 181 Special Revenue Fund. That interest would accrue there. All of it would just be unrestricted reserves in those funds.
Well, I believe in putting money in the least restrictive place possible. I don't think we use this to reduce general fund spending.
Households, quote, most disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, promotes using funds for, quote, a strong, inclusive, and equitable recovery, especially uses with long-term benefits for health and economic outcomes. And then there was a final rule about the investments, and it just said that could cities choose to place the funds in an interest-bearing account, and even though it is not required, and it says recipients can place funds in interest-bearing accounts. They do not need to remit interest to Treasury and are not limited to using that interest for eligible uses under the state and local fund recovery funds.
I need to clarify that another use that you didn't mention was revenue recovery. And that is in fact what the city of Clearwater used the ARPA monies for, was revenue recovery. You have opted as a council to embark on projects and programs with available general fund reserves in pursuing the ideals behind the ARPA, but you've done that voluntarily. You're not required to do that. You were allowed to use that for revenue recovery, so.
And we did that, didn't we do that because it makes it easier for reporting on those
And yeah, and
funds,
it's also
right?
a lot more flexibility through the programs, because if we were doing grant programs under the ARPA restrictions, they would be much more restrictive, and there would have to be proof of damages from COVID. It's a whole different ballgame, and other municipalities are having a lot of trouble getting money spent because of those types of restrictions.
And I do appreciate that, and I do appreciate that we put it in those buckets philosophically following what the ARPA funds, you know, those other intents that I just read. So it's just more of keeping that interest then with those same, you know, reasons that we put it in specific types of buckets.
I'd like to look at some of the ARPA funds again anyway. I think there's a lack of geographic equity in how they were spent. I think, you know, Wood Valley was unfortunately left out of the process. It is an area that we have a lot of low-income residents as well. They have a very small center there, and there are some things that I'd like to see improved out there as well. It's something I'd like to talk about at some point. Boys and Girls Club function out there, but if you go out and look at the center, and then you look at what we have in North and South and Lake Bellevue, it's vastly different.
Wood Valley by Moccasin Lake? I would agree.
They've got a very old, kind of, you know, almost abandoned rec center from probably 40 years ago, 50 years. How old, Chief?
I-
Yeah.
Yeah, I bought a house in there in 72.
And was it there?
It was a FHA 235 program. It was great. I think I bought a new house for like $235 a month.
Was the center there?
It was a nice little community, but you know, it was a long time ago.
But the community center, was it there
No, it
in
wasn't.
72?
No.
So that's just one thing I'd like to discuss too at some point. And maybe the interest could go towards something out there.
Well, I was just,
I would encourage you all to visit it.
as I, you know, think about I think that the ARPA grant, at least one part of our grants are coming in, weren't they due like February 17th, or I think they're coming due, the applications. But I don't know how many applications are going to come in and what that looks like. But if these interest, you know, if $250,000 of interest could be used for, if we have this flood of applications for another 50,000 here or there, or whatever, it's just.
And that would also always be council's option, because wherever it's sitting in reserves,
It's unrestricted.
dictates the use of reserves, so.
Okay, it's more of a philosophical,
Any comments?
what do you guys think?
Questions?
Do you think it should stay with the funds and the intent of the funds?
I'd like to look into what you were suggesting about moving them or using those funds to look at other areas that were not focused on, that were missed, right? That's what you were thinking?
Everything, you know, I mean, we've put aside some money for affordable housing and some other things, but the majority of the money all stayed west of 19. There's a lot of Clearwater that's east of 19. And I think it's an error, and I think it should be fixed. So, but I'm fine leaving the interest there. I just would like us to relook at that.
Okay.
Okay, and I would encourage you all to go out there sometime. It's just over the railroad tracks on the way to Moccasin Lake.
The peacocks, all over it.
Don't run them over. Invasive removals, Councilmember Allbritton.
Okay, I brought this up in I think the last council meeting, and put it on this to have a discussion on it. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you to give the details on it.
Good evening, Earl Scheib, the deputy engineer for the city engineer for the city of Clearwater. We got the appraisal to remove mangroves from both, remove exotic invasives from amongst the mangroves on both sides of Memorial Broadway.
Emails tomorrow, I'm sending them all to you, Elliot.
Mangroves are protected, we're not touching any mangroves, that does not happen. The estimate by O'Neill's was $29,900 to remove them from both sides, and staff is prepared to move forward with that if that's council's direction.
Any questions?
I'd like to add something. We had a citizen volunteer to pay for removal of, actually to trim the mangroves, and he says he's got a certified mangrove arborist that he'll pay from Island Way, on the north side of the bridge, or the north side of the causeway, from Island Way to the small bridge going over to the beach. And I'd like to see if we could incorporate that in there too. I mean, if we take all the invasive species out, that's fine. But if we could take the clippings from, and I don't think it's a lot of a lot of clippings that will come from mangroves, but he wants to cut them in accordance to the, what the certified arborist will allow under law.
I'll have to explore the rules on that. I know there are some, and I have them in here, but I don't have time to read them at the moment. But that's something we can explore. I don't know if, do we typically support volunteers working on DOT or city road right-of-way? Is that something we're willing to consider?
I think staff needs to look into it further and come back.
All right.
Okay.
I mean, FDOT is tight, but they're not actually on the roadway, they're on the right-of-way.
It's true.
Right?
We have an MOU with DOT that lets us work on Memorial Causeway. We'd have to investigate all those different options, but we can.
I'm not sure who the arborist is. I think he was somebody that worked for the city, but.
Was it Alan Mayberry?
Alan Mayberry.
I'm not sure. I wasn't told his name. He just said he had a certified mangrove arborist.
Okay. I will look into that and we'll get back with you.
Okay.
So this money would come out of general fund reserves, I'm assuming? Or a budget?
It's currently in our tree contract with O'Neill's, which was
obviously cut, no pun intended, seeing as we're not cutting as many trees.
So the funding is currently in the contract and we have it.
Well, I'm fine with taking the invasive species out, just with the understanding that they're going to come back, at some point. They just do. Is everybody fine with that?
Yes.
Okay. 12.13, request for external county organizations to provide presentations to the council. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, so this is part of, I think, good governance and my due diligence to understand our community, the environment that we live in, and funding sources, and what's expected. And so the presentation from the gentleman with the TDC, laid out the amount of money in a budget, how you apply for that money, what are the comparators, all that stuff. So that's a good understanding. We're going to have an ask from the Phillies, probably, shortly, to look at. And, I keep this 5x7 note card, that it's like the shopping cart. And I think of it as financial obligations that we have, things that we're planning, or the debt payment on Imagine Clearwater, more staffing that we need. We had the, ADA presentation. We had the business operations presentation saying we needed more staffing. And, And as we look forward to prepare for the budget this spring, next month, the end of this month, in March, I want to have a clear understanding about what's in our shopping cart, what are our residents experiencing, what their needs are. And you know, I serve as the chair of the Continuum of Care now, which is a county-wide organization that manages the Homeless Leadership Alliance and works through grant appropriations for nonprofits. And I see that there's great need. And I understand that there's great need in our community with our residents. And when we talk about services that are needed and we think about what our responsibility is as a city and then what the county's responsibility is, I want a clear understanding of that, because if the county's supposed to be doing something, they should, and if they're not able to, somebody needs to pick up the slack, and maybe it's us and our budget decision. So I really want to understand that before I start doling out money this spring.
Before we.
That's right, before we. I'm speaking for myself, all right,
Okay.
before we
Clear.
Before we do, I'd like to have an understanding before I make a vote. You know, before I have a decision, I'd like to know more. And I just think it's wise for us to have a presentation, especially when the mayor, when you said, that's not in our lane, that's in the county's lane. And so I'd like an understanding of where my tax dollars go to the county and how they're used. And that goes for all of our Clearwater residents. And so I thought it would be a great idea to have the county come and present and answer some questions like that. And I understand there's been some conversations. Have you talked to Barry Burton
They're not
about
gonna
this?
come.
They're not going to come. All right. So if they're not going to come because they feel that it's going to be an attack, or I'm going to be critical, or, you know, ask questions about, you know, case management ratios and the number of homeless families living in cars, the lack of transitional housing, we need more family shelters. If that's perceived as an attack, it's really just a finding of facts and data and information. It's not an attack. And so if the county doesn't want to come and do a presentation, then it's my responsibility to reach out to Barry Burton and anyone else and have a one-on-one, because I need that information to make decisions. And so that's how I'm going to proceed. And it's only due diligence. It really is. Because if somebody says, that's not our responsibility, I need a confirmation that it's not, to communicate to our residents that this is where you need to go, and this is the situation. And so it's, you know, if you've had conversations and you and Barry have decided that they're not coming.
Ho.
Okay.
Hold on.
All right, hold on.
Well, no, you put words in people's mouths all the time.
Well,
And
now
I'm
that's
gonna-
an absolute. It's not all the time.
Quite a bit.
Frequently? Okay. Well, correct me.
Well, I was meeting with Barry. He was aware of this request, and he said they are not going to honor it. They're not going to do it with every city that requests all that. He said all of the items are in the budget. Anybody can look at it. It's public record. And so he said, I'm not going to accommodate that. And I said, do you want me to deliver that message? Because I really don't want to. I'm not anybody's messenger, frankly, you know. But he said, yeah, I would appreciate that.
Well, that's his call. So
Yeah, it is his
I'll pick
call.
up the
It's
phone
not-
and give him a call.
Not
No,
something
I
I'm
appreciate
doing,
it. Yeah,
okay? I
that's
didn't
fine.
say, hey, don't honor this.
Yeah.
I just said, that's the request.
Okay.
He said, we're not going to be doing that.
Okay. Well, good. Well, hopefully he'll meet with me one-on-one. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. I mean, that's what I want. I think, you know, from you all, who generally sit up here kind of quiet, do you think we need an understanding of the finances as we go forward, right?
Well, that is in the budget, though. I mean,
Okay,
seriously, it's
okay.
just like our budget.
Yeah.
We have departments, we have all the different line items, we have where our priorities are in a
But-
given year.
Yeah.
Their budget is enormous compared to ours. I think it's 2.2 billion.
Okay, I'll learn more, it'll be fine. Yeah, I mean, all you can do is ask for people to come and present, and if they don't feel comfortable doing that, then I can do it one-on-one.
Or if there's specific questions, they can also be provided in a written form.
How about
But we were not meeting about that. We were meeting about other issues, so.
So I had asked too about a presentation from 211, which thousands of our residents call frequently. And again, I think that's an understanding of what our residents are up against as far as social supports, mental health supports, crisis supports. And I would like a presentation from 211. The last conversation I had with the woman who heads up 211 at one of our providers funders meetings was she was preparing for a presentation. So I don't know if that's been nixed or if that's if we have consensus to have a presentation from 211 about how many calls they take from Clearwater, what types of calls, what services they're able to offer, wait times.
I'll let Ms. Poyer deal with asking for a presentation and see where that goes. Have you asked for these presentations from organizations as the chair?
Of the COC?
Yeah.
I just became chair in January.
Okay,
so-
but you were a member too
Yeah.
previously.
Yeah.
Was there a request for any of these reports?
We have, no, there has not, I have not made a request.
Okay.
But are you guys interested in?
I need some clarification though. When I look at this, you're asking, and I'm a proponent of this, of education, so you're asking that there's a process put in place to have different entities, organizations give presentations to us as an educational tool. So what would the process be? We formally ask city staff a request and then get a consensus between us, or we can just name whoever we want? What's the process in getting this done without it be a free-for-all? You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? I know.
Well, I don't know that it's a free-for-all, that if one of us has an interest in a topic and learning more that pertains to our function as a council member, I think we should be able to ask for a presentation, especially when it will help us, inform us equally about information that we may be voting on.
What would we be voting on specifically? I mean, I guess if we were voting on something, then it would be helpful to have that, but to have every entity come and talk, because maybe we'll vote on something, I think would probably be a waste of time.
Well, not every entity, but here's, for example, I think we've been giving like $250,000 to Safe Harbor for the last 12 years, an allocation from general funds. So it's remained stagnant for that amount. I think it's good to have an understanding of what that money is spent for and what their success rate is. What's that money even doing? Why has it remained stagnant? And I think if we have a presentation from 211 to give a status update on the issues in the mental health, social service issues in our community, perhaps we want to take that $250,000 and use it somewhere else. It's more effective.
But you're really focused on social services.
Yeah.
I mean, because I could have told you everything that you learned tonight about the TDC.
Well, no, I mean, that's budget.
And probably Councilmember Allbritton could talk about all things PSTA, right? You've been serving on for.
I'm gonna say a few things tonight on closing statement.
Sweet.
But we're all
3 minutes.
involved up
Use
here
them
with
well.
different organizations, and, I think it's good to bring the organizations that we represent Clearwater up. When there's things that I feel probably I should be talking about for Pinellas. Briefly, 3 minutes, just giving an update, and probably PSD as well, because there's a lot going on with those every time we have a council meeting. they stagger it, so I have to do one time, and then I don't, like, like Fort Pinellas is next week, so I'm gonna miss it. I'll have to talk about it next time, but I could set it up and do that. And I would like to hear from committees you're on, but I think 3 minutes I could tell you everything that we did, a brief recap on what we've talked about and how it affects Clearwater.
Well, and I would remind everybody, if there is a big issue that impacts Clearwater on one of the committees you're on, or boards, you really ought to bring that back. Because we're not all, operating in a vacuum. We are representing the entire council and the city when we're sitting on those boards.
Council, only because it was raised, we do have a presentation scheduled by Tampa Bay Cares, which is formerly 211, and that is scheduled on March 16th.
I don't know that we've answered your question.
You know what, I'll give you a very concrete example. So I suggested, only once so far, a specific presentation that basically kind of gave us an update of what's going on in Tallahassee. It was bipartisan, and I saw it. And then I suggested that he would make the same presentation here, and you, Vice Mayor Beckman, brought up a concern that you felt that it was inappropriate because it could be partisan. So even though it wasn't, you had the right to say, I don't really want to hear that. So I was wondering if that process should be put in place where we suggest who we want to talk, and all of us put a process in place where we can have some say in whether we want to hear it as a council or not. Is that clear enough?
Yeah.
No?
Well, I don't know about how to hash out a process up here tonight. I mean, I guess it would be best then if we just brought it back as a council discussion item, just like we do at work sessions. And then we can discuss it.
So there's nothing in council rules about requests for presentations?
Not currently that I'm aware of.
Not currently. Council can certainly codify a rule if the council would like to do so. It is challenging, though, because number one, there's oftentimes great diversity among council members as to who you'd like to hear from or not. And then number two, so there's a question of, is it majority vote? Is that how it would work? Is it a ranking system? Does everyone get one? And just kind of figuring out who you want to make the request to. And number two, but just also be realistic that it is a request. And sometimes, as we've seen recently, they may say no. And so we also have to be, recognizing that can happen too. So, but beyond that, it's really up to council as to what level of formality, if any, you'd like to assign to this process.
I think it would be best to do it that way, is to have people bring it as a discussion item. And then we can discuss the organization and the reasoning behind the request.
And then just vote on it?
Yeah, have consensus as to whether everybody's comfortable. Then we can ask the organization and they can either accommodate us or not. So, okay.
Sounds good.
All right, then I'll go to closing comments. Councilmember Allbritton, I'll go first. You
All
can
right.
go first, seeing as
I got a couple things. The PST Planning Committee yesterday, I got to see the first contactless payments that PST has initiated this week. What that means is that when you get on a bus now, you could pay with cash, but what they'd really like to do is get people on and off, faster. So now with this contactless payments, you can use a credit card, debit card, prepaid card. They've had Flamingo card for a couple of years now that you can load up. You can still use that. You can use your iPhone with the Apple Wallet, touch it, and it takes out the pay. You can use your watch. If you have an Apple Watch, touch it and get on the, And it really worked. I tried it. Most of the planning committee board members donated their $2.50 yesterday just to try it out. But I think that's going to make everything a little quicker and faster on public transportation, which that's what we want. So the other thing I wanted to say, a good friend of mine, a family member died. Dr. Frank Byron Smitherman died last week. He was 93. He's been a doctor in our community for over 30 years. I kind of grew up with his kids, Sherry, Julie, David, and Mark. Mark was my doctor for lots of years, and I swam together with him. But his father, they're going to have a ceremony, ceremony at First United Methodist Church on Saturday, this coming Saturday at 11 o'clock. If anybody remembers Byron, you're welcome to come. That's it.
Vice Mayor?
Okay, so yesterday I traveled to Sanibel Island with some city leadership from Indian Rocks Beach and Treasure Island, and it was about a 12 or 14 hour day. So I went down with Mayor Cookie Kennedy of Indian Rocks Beach, Tyler Payne of Treasure Island, and some of their leadership. We took a small U-Haul of supplies for people who were impacted by Hurricane Ian, and we really just wanted to, we arranged it so we could meet with their city leadership and learn about the impacts of Hurricane Ian and how they're dealing with it right now. Most of their community is still not living in their homes, if their homes are even there. We certainly drove around a whole bunch after our 4.5-hour meeting with their leadership. Only 4% of their properties were not affected, so it's devastating. We met with the mayor of Sanibel Island, Holly Smith, their city manager, Dan Sousa, as well as the directors of their major departments, including finance, planning, fire, police, public works. And so I have pages and pages of notes from it. Rarely materializes, but it impacted Sanibel Island full speed. They emphasized and there was an emphasis on the importance of pre-contracts. They had a number of lessons learned about their reentry pass system that was pretty significant. And so I think, we'll need to take some time to look at that. He said, both the city manager and the police chief, as well as the fire chief, bad people show up and you've got a plan to mitigate that and discourage it on the front end. And these are like laborers, contractors, people that shouldn't be down there when you're trying to do work, and you've got insurance adjusters there, you've got real estate people there, you've got contractors, laborers from all out of state, just a hodgepodge of people that cause confusion and robberies. They didn't have violent crime, but there was a lot of looting. Intergovernmental relationships are key. They had permitting challenges and lessons learned in that department, FEMA challenges, and even figuring out how and where U.S. Postal Service could be reestablished was a challenge. Resident education is key, especially new residents in your community. They suggested perhaps holding an annual, here's what happens if we were to get hit by, a Category 4 or 5, or there's an evacuation plan. It really makes us think about our code and the resiliency study that we've commissioned, and so that'll be a factor in these really important lessons that they've learned. I'm hoping that they will present to the Florida League of Cities this summer and do a 4 or 5 hour seminar and really share this information with everyone. It was incredibly valuable. It was riveting, and it makes you feel how lucky we are that we didn't take that on. But it's incredible. I know they're a lot smaller than we are, but wow, it was unbelievable. And they're still going through it. So people kind of forget because it's still big hurdles, and financially it's devastating. I think their ask from the state is more than their annual budget, for sure.
It'll take them a decade.
Oh, that's what years, yeah. But I want to just, say thank you to the mayor, Holly Smith, and that city manager, Dan Sousa, as well as all the directors who spent all that time. It was informative and valuable.
Councilmember Bunker.
We had several people speaking tonight during Citizens to be Heard about the protests at Bread and Roses Women's Clinic on both sides. And I had to laugh when one of the men said, "Be careful what you're asking for because Scientology is going to demand a buffer zone." Well, I laughed because Scientology asked for that back in 2000. And you can still look on Watterson Street at where white lines were burned into the street saying, you can't walk through these lines. There was a 10-foot buffer zone to keep critics of Scientology away from Scientologists and vice versa. And that was one of the things that we looked at, trying to help out the women's clinic. You know, we need something sensible like this. I will say this, back in 2000, we adopted rules of protesting we called Gandhi Tech, which was be polite, don't be aggressive, let the other side, attack you if they will, but we remain peaceful. And that came in handy 8 years later. In 2008, I worked with a few people to leak the Tom Cruise tape onto the internet. You may remember that's when he first came out talking about Scientology and it was just looked nuts. That went around the world, and suddenly because of that, there were tens of thousands of people taking to the street to protest Scientology all around the world. And I because they were talking about doing criminal things, I made a video saying, listen, be smart. You don't want to do anything illegal. It's going to get you in trouble. It's not going to help anything. Protest peacefully. And from that, these people did. They had a remarkable series of protests for months after months where they found creative, fun ways to get a message across. Now, if the protesters at Bread and Roses used some Gandhi tech, we wouldn't have to worry about anything. But things have gotten out of hand there, so we do need to see what we can do to help them, and I know we're looking into that. Because there have been some troubling situations there that go well beyond anything that Scientology and the critics dealt with back in 2000. And that's all.
Councilmember Scheib.
Well, I have quite a few people to thank, starting with Chief Slaughter, who allowed me to monitor in the Real Life Time Center where the CPD Vice and Narcotics team as well as the SWAT team served a search warrant on St. John's Drive. It was impressive to see all that it was involved. I saw firsthand the incredible use of technology, skill, and professionalism of all the team, and the operation ended safely and successfully. And honestly, I felt like you were Gibbs and NCIS. It was just like amazing. I felt like I was on the set of NCIS. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for that experience. Also, as some of you may be aware, one of my priorities is to facilitate the education and awareness of human trafficking. And our first initiative was the education of all city staff, which has been completed, and to expand from there. So this last Saturday, September rather, when city staff and council went to Philadelphia, I used this unique opportunity to engage with the Phillies in becoming our community partner in this initiative. And so I would like to formally thank the Phillies ownership and management for joining us in this cause. Because of this agreement, the Phillies, along with Mr. Timberlake, hosted our community outreach seminar at the stadium, and they were wonderful hosts. They graciously agreed to showcase our 30-second PSA video during spring training, which is monumental, and I'm very grateful for that. I also want to thank all the community leaders who came out and attended and committed to educate. I am blessed to have the wonderful Dottie Skipper Groover from the No More Foundation, who is a mastermind behind this program, as well as Kate Popa and Caleb Bell for their engaging and informative presentation. Major Natalie Lick-Haley for adding to that presentation, and Robert Telford for making the PSA video. I also want to thank the city leadership in facilitating all these efforts. But last and certainly not least, Samantha Millay. Despite wearing many hats, she has never wavered and has been an incredibly wonderful added person to this team, and I really want to thank her. I want to end tonight with a message: if you see something suspicious, say something, and call the 1-888-373-7888 number.
Thank you. Well, we had a discussion tonight about solid waste again, and that certainly is an embarrassing situation that I know that we will get rectified. I have full faith in that. What I want to make sure people know is there's a lot of things in the city of Clearwater that are getting done efficiently and getting done right, and we have great staff with a great history of serving our citizens and doing a lot of things first. And so, as embarrassing as this is, I know we're going to get it rectified, and I just want people to know that they should have faith in this city and the services that we're providing and the employees that are doing it. Unfortunately, the actions of a few are overshadowing an enormous organization that really runs very, very well. So I want to thank all of our employees. We did have a habitat build with elected officials, and it was great to have 3 council members down there. I know others had conflicts, but Councilmember Allbritton and the Vice Mayor and myself. I want to thank the American Legion for their 4 chaplains ceremony. It's a great ceremony celebrating 4 chaplains that were on the USS Dorchester, and they did not have enough life vests or lifeboats, and they gave up their position and went down with the ship. And so it was a really incredible ceremony. There was a gentleman there that is 100 years old. He was walking around and served in 5 different conflicts: World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Falklands, and Grenada.
Wow.
Absolutely unbelievable. We had the Florida City County Managers Association out on Clearwater Beach at the Sheraton Sand Key. A lot of our staff participated in that. It was great to have them here. Again, our city is known for supporting that organization, and it was great to host all those city managers and county administrators. The state of the region was good that we had over at USF. I will share those reports that I have in my office with you all. There are some areas that the Bay Area is doing great, and there are some areas that we really need to work on. It's great to have the Salvation Army annual dinner and hear about all the things that occurred this year, all the different ways that they helped those who are in the greatest need. The Chamber had a great annual dinner last night. I want to congratulate Carlton Ward again for becoming Mr. Clearwater. With that, we are adjourned. God bless.